Hello and good morning. It is 6 a.m. and on today's programme, the Catholic Church has a new leader and he'll speak later this morning.
And in sport, it's an all-English Europa League final after wins for both Manchester United and Tottenham.
It is Friday, the 9th of May. Pope Leo XIV celebrates his first Mass this morning after becoming the first ever pontiff from the United States. While overnight, Indian claims of attacks along its western border are denied by Pakistan. Sky News hears from a survivor of a rising form of domestic violence, non-fatal strangulation, who's urging others to notice the signs.
Any sort of abuse isn't okay, whether it starts off emotional. They often start off that way and they escalate, and they can escalate badly. Take what happened to me as a huge warning sign.
President Zelensky and Trump push for a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine, while Russia prepares for a show of military force on their Victory Day.
And there's an English team in the Conference League final too after Chelsea eased past the Swedish side, Djurgården.
Good morning and thank you for joining us on The Breakfast Programme. Well, the Pope will later celebrate his first Mass as head of the Catholic Church in the room in which he was elected. Cardinals are going to join Pope Leo XIV in the Sistine Chapel after he became the first person from the United States to be elected Supreme Pontiff. Siobhan Robbins is our top story.
He arrived as a cardinal, but emerged as a pope. This is the moment the world saw the face of the new leader of the Catholic Church, stepping onto the balcony to the roar of the waiting crowd in St. Peter's Square. Cardinal Robert Prevost, the first American pope, the first Augustinian. With a simple gesture, he greeted the thousands gathered below. For some, the emotion of the day was overwhelming. And briefly, the pontiff too looked overcome by the enormity of the moment. Before he offered his first message to the world as Pope Leo XIV.
Peace be with all of you.
A message of peace for some, perhaps an echo of another who stood on this balcony.
Fratelli, sorelle carissimi. Brothers and sisters, dear brothers and sisters, this is the first greeting of Christ resurrected, the good pastor who gave life for the Lord.
Pope Francis, a man who also fought for the poor and vulnerable, the predecessor who Leo paid tribute to.
The Papa Francesco. And Pope Francis, in fact, was always courageous, and he blessed Rome. The Pope that blessed Rome gave this blessing to the world, to the whole world on that Easter morning.
The announcement was the climax of a long day for watchers packed into Vatican City. Just over 24 hours after conclave started, the signal came that the 133 cardinals had picked a new pope. White smoke, and with that, the sign that the life of one cardinal has changed forever. He is now one of the most powerful men in the world, the leader of 1.4 billion Catholics. Leo, a papal name that historically signifies strength during a crisis, a moderate pope that some hoped would be a unifying force.
He spoke many times about Francis, so it's kind of a continuity. And it's also because he prayed for everybody, for all. This is a continuity also with Francis, with the spirit of the Pope Francis.
And that excitement would carry long into the night. As Rome celebrates its bishop.
Patris et Filii
et Spiritus Sancti discendat super vos et maniat semper.
Leo XIV, a pope of the new world, bringing promise of a new chapter for the Catholic Church. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News, Vatican City.
Of course, we'll have more from the Vatican throughout the morning here on Sky News. To India now, and they say that Pakistan has launched a number of attacks along its border overnight using drones and other munitions. Pakistan has rejected the claims, but world leaders are urging the two nuclear-armed neighbours to show restraint and avoid any escalation. Well, it was late last night that Pakistan's ambassador to the United States told the American broadcaster CNN that their respective national security councils remain in contact. Let's bring in our India reporter, Neville Lazarus, joining us from New Delhi. Neville, great to have you with us. So is that correct? Are the two sides in direct contact? And is this thing still in danger of escalating?
Yes, it is. It is in danger of escalating even further now. Just in the last half hour, we've heard air raid sirens in Chandigarh, which is a very large city in the north. It is the capital of Punjab and Haryana state in India. And India has been saying that the attacks which they did on the 7th morning, those 9 sites which they hit, were on terror targets, terror infrastructure, which they hit with missiles and air defense air assaults. Now, Pakistan has denied that there are any of these terror organizations existing in their country, but nevertheless, India did these attacks against these sites, saying that they did not hit any military facility or target any civilians. Earlier on, the Indian High Commissioner Vikram Doraiswamy spoke to Sky, and this is what he said.
We have made it abundantly clear in our official statement, again, as I said, both yesterday and today. We're not looking for an escalation, but if Pakistan responds, as we have done, we will respond proportionately and in exactly the same line.
Which would be what? Targeting these terror bases or
Well,
beyond?
look, we have said if the military is attacked, we had not attacked their military. As they've now started trying to attack our bases, we've hit back at their air defense systems and at their units too.
And this is exactly what happened yesterday. There was a lull in the sort of tensions after a really intense day of military escalation between the two sides. Yesterday till later afternoon, there was sort of not much of military activity, which then picked up later. India claims that a number of its military installations were targeted, which were thwarted, and in response, they attacked a number of Pakistani sites, military installations, and radar systems in a number of cities in Pakistan. But this could easily get out of hand now.
OK, Neville, for now, thank you for that. And, of course, more from the region throughout the day here on Sky News. Let me bring you some of the morning's other headlines now. And bin workers in Birmingham are going to form a large picket later as the strike in the city enters into its 5th month. Negotiations to end the pay dispute continue to stall, with the latest talks on Tuesday failing to come to resolution. Health bosses warn NHS England is planning previously unthinkable cuts in an attempt to balance the books. NHS providers say this includes a reduction in patient services, such as diabetes care for young people and rehab centres. Cuts to frontline staff and overtime for doctors are also expected, putting the drive to cut the hospital waiting lists at risk. And there's been a small increase in foot traffic in shops. Figures across high streets were up 0.2% in March and April compared to the same months last year, with visits to retail parks up 2.7%. It's hoped plans to shorten the length of apprenticeships will get more new teachers into classrooms quickly. From August, courses will only be 9 months, down from a full year. The move comes after Labour's pledge to recruit an additional 6,500 teachers over the next 5 years. Well, President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that a 30-day ceasefire will be a real indicator of President Putin's willingness to bring peace in Ukraine. That call for a 30-day unconditional truce was echoed by President Trump. It comes after the Ukrainian and US presidents spoke on the phone last night.
Ukraine is ready for a full ceasefire starting right now, from this very moment. A 30-day silence, but it must be real. The Russians must respond appropriately by supporting the ceasefire. 30 days that could become the beginning of years of peace.
Meanwhile, in Moscow's Red Square, the stage is being set for a huge military parade today. It's Russia's Victory Day as they mark the moment they defeated Nazi Germany in the Second World War. Well, our Moscow correspondent, Ivor Bennett, reports.
In Russia, they don't just remember, they reenact. It involves tanks, gunfire, explosions, and a life-sized replica of the Reichstag. Actors are reliving the battle for Berlin and the moment the Soviet victory banner was raised over the German parliament. It's part of Russia's anniversary celebrations to mark the end of World War II. And it's proving very popular.
There was a lump in my throat, tears welling up. The children were delighted.
This is necessary for the dead and the living. Let them remember and live with the victory of our grandfathers.
Victory Day is a sacred date on the Russian calendar, remembering the 27 million Soviet citizens who died.
For the rest of Europe, this anniversary is a celebration of peace, but here it increasingly feels like a celebration of war. And that's because of Russia's current conflict. The authorities want people here to view the invasion of Ukraine in the same way as World War II, as an existential struggle against a foreign aggressor.
China's Xi Jinping's among several world leaders in Moscow for the celebrations, a major boost for Vladimir Putin.
Together with our Chinese friends, we firmly stand guard over historical truth, protect the memory of the events of the war years, and counteract modern manifestations of neo-Nazism and militarism.
There are some still alive who fought the real Nazis, and like many here, Nikolai believes the Kremlin's narrative.
The army must liberate the territory of Ukraine from Nazism and allow the population to live the way they want.
The memories of the past now fused with the present. Ivor Bennett, Sky News, Moscow.
And we will be back in Moscow from about 8 a.m. when those Victory Day commemorations begin, and we'll bring you parts of it live. Now, Ashna has joined us to tell us about what's been seen as a troubling rise in one form of domestic violence. Ashna, morning to you. A warning, your report does contain some distressing images. Just tell us about what you found.
Well, I'm talking today about strangulation, and viewers might be shocked to hear that in the UK it's the second most common method that people use to murder women after using knives. And last year, when it came to domestic abuse cases, there was an almost 50% rise in incidents involving strangulation compared to the year before. And I've been speaking to someone called Kerry who survived being strangled 3 times, and she has spoken to us for the first time, essentially to warn others about the escalation in violence in abusive relationships. And yes, you're right, my report does contain some distressing footage.
This is Kerry, and a man she thought she trusted. But their year-long whirlwind relationship culminated in one horrifying night in August last year, when during an argument, after Kerry confronted Michael Cosgrove about texting other women, he started to repeatedly strangle her.
And he was still ranting and raving, saying he was going to kill me. How he hoped I knew he was dead. He was going to kill me and then he was going to kill himself. I wasn't getting out of this bedroom alive. I remember screaming as loud as I could. And as soon as I did that, his hands were over my mouth and he was on top of me on the bed. and his hands were around my throat again, but this time he didn't stop. And then the next thing I remember is just being awake and the room was full of police and paramedics.
Cosgrove had left her unconscious and fled by jumping out of the window. He was later found hiding in the boot of her car. His actions burst blood vessels in Kerry's eye and left her covered in bruises with a fractured rib. Her struggle evident from her snapped nails.
It was easy for me in my head to downplay what he'd done to me because I couldn't face thinking about it. What happened to me that night was always going to happen. I just wish that I'd recognised the signs sooner.
Strangulation is the second most common method used by men to kill women. It can form part of a pattern of abuse Bernie is used to seeing.
It's the ultimate form of control, isn't it? If you think that your life is going to be taken away from you, literally, and in the hands of the person that you trust the most or that you're in a relationship with, then that's really scary. We hear lots of sex education providers, teachers saying that they're hearing it in schools.
Violent pornography has contributed to young people being exposed to strangulation and choking, but it has always been associated with domestic abuse.
I've seen victims who thought they've imagined or dreamt what's happened to them, and that feeling of being completely out of control of what's happened to your body at the hands of somebody else. You can imagine how terrifying that must be.
This is the police! Make yourself known!
Cosgrove was found guilty of attempting to murder and intentionally strangling Kerry. She now wants other survivors of abuse to recognise the signs.
Any sort of abuse isn't okay, whether it starts off emotional. They often start off that way and they escalate, and they can escalate badly. Take what happened to me as a huge warning sign.
Kerry says she's been given a second chance at life. Not all her scars are visible, but she hopes in time they will heal.
Ashna, powerful reporting, and Kelly's story is one that needs to be told, but you've been speaking as well to the effect that this has been having on the next generation. People are asking questions about this kind of thing.
Yeah, in schools nonetheless too. I mean, at the end of February, a review was carried out looking into pornography in the UK, and it was carried out by someone called Baroness Burton, a Conservative peer. It was initially commissioned by the Conservative government, but it reported back at the end of February. And she found in her work that there was this extraordinary prevalence of extreme, harmful and degrading pornography when it came to the abuse of women online. And it has been, unfortunately, influencing young relationships when it's compounded by a huge host of misogynistic content on social media too. As part of her review, she found that 38% of young women said they'd been choked during an intimate relationship. Now, Bernie, in that piece, who is the chief executive of the Institute for Addressing Strangulation, talked to me about how teachers have been asked by kids in schools, how do I strangle someone safely? And they would say to that, there is no safe way to strangle somebody. The anatomy is the anatomy. You are reducing oxygen to the brain, which in its worst scenarios can lead to death, but can also lead to, miscarriage and brain injury and have strokes even in long-term impacts. The government say, whilst graphic pornography is illegal online, they do acknowledge that it is still present on those platforms. When it comes to pornography DVDs, going back all those years, you had regulation in place. So such graphic content wasn't available, but because you've got this online world, it's really difficult to stop. But they say they want to do that, the government, if they are going to halve violence against women and girls in the next decade.
Something to get a move on with. Ashna, thank you very much for that for now. Well, survivors of the Nottingham stabbing attack have given their first television interviews, with one person saying they wish it had been them and not two young students. Emma Birchley has this report.
Hemmed in by police after killing 3 people on the streets of Nottingham. Earlier, Valdo Calacane had stabbed to death students Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar, both just 19 years old, and Ian Coates, who was 65. He would then steal the caretaker's van and use it as a weapon. Wayne Burkitt was the first of 3 people to be driven into that morning, nearly 2 years ago. Catapulted into the air, and left in a coma.
My legs hurt all the time, my back hurts, my head, painful, very headaches all the time, and memory. It's horrible not having no memory, not remembering things, not remembering people you've known and worked for.
Callaghan admitted manslaughter by diminished responsibility and attempted murder. Experts said his schizophrenia meant he was not fully responsible for his actions, but a long list of missed opportunities to stop him has emerged. And last month, confirmation came from the Justice Secretary that a statutory public inquiry would be held.
Mr. Speaker, this inquiry must be thorough in its assessment of the facts and unsparing in its recommendations. That is the very least that we owe to those who have lost so much and fought so hard for this moment.
Among them, Sharon Miller, one of 2 others to be hit, left unable to work. Like Wayne, she wishes she had died rather than Grace and Barnaby, who were still so young.
He should be able to go to work and they should be able to walk out from wherever there was. And Ian should have been able to get in his van to go to work. It's just wrong. Just wrong.
Their lawyer says it's important they have their voices heard in the inquiry.
They don't want to be forgotten about. Understandably, they've been concentrating on their rehabilitation. But I think they want answers to the questions that they've got, which are numerous, and they want to find out what's going to change in the future so that this doesn't happen again.
The survivors and bereaved agree. Whatever the inquiry concludes, what follows has to be more than just words, so others like Valdo Callaghan are not left to cause lifelong torment for so many. Emma Birchley, Sky News.
OK, let's take a look at the weather forecast.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, the next few days look mainly dry, but it will turn warmer and thundery downpours are possible on Sunday. It's mostly fine out now, if a little chilly, with early low cloud across central and eastern England that will lift soon. There will be plenty of sunshine across the country this morning, but some fair weather cloud will bubble up by lunch. The odd light shower is possible, with Southwest Island most at risk. It will be warmer than recently, especially near eastern coast, but the far northwest and southeast will be blustery.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
OK, well, there is plenty more to come on the breakfast show this morning. As we look at the new Pope from Chicago to the Vatican, we take a closer look at his life before this moment. And why Kemi Badenoch believes the UK has not got a good deal with the United States. And we'll take a look at what's making headlines in today's papers in our news review at 7:15.
The only way to Gaza for us right now is with the Israeli military. The IDF had brought us in to show us a tunnel network under a residential neighbourhood.
The length of time it must have took to have created these tunnels must have taken years.
At the end of the day, it's war at the top. It's war down here.
I'm Alistair Bungle, Sky's Middle East correspondent based here in Jerusalem. As we were filming, there was a gun battle in the next street.
This neighbourhood, the Israeli military say, was the stronghold of Hamas's Rafah brigade.
It was just after 6:30 a.m. when the first shots were fired.
I remember everything. It was a day that I don't think I'll ever be able to forget.
There's no moon, perfect conditions for smugglers and human traffickers trying to move fuel, weapons and people.
The valleys in between, they're some of the main smuggling routes.
After days of negotiation, a major smuggler here has agreed to meet us.
The families that we've spoken to are people who have died trying to cross into Europe. They say you're a murderer. Are you a murderer? No.
Sky News, get the full story first. Begum was 15 when she left East London with 2 school friends to join Islamic State in Syria.
Do you feel that you have committed a crime to the extent that you should serve time in a British prison?
I mean, I feel like the only crime I committed was coming here.
If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. I can take the heat. The second thing that Harry Truman said, was in politics, if you want a friend, get a dog.
My children will love a dog.
In Tel Aviv, a constant streak of interceptions filled the night sky as waves of missiles came in.
It appears to be a very, very large and sustained attack on Israel.
The big announcement, the battle for number 10.
The drone is above us.
It is a chaotic scene.
They've asked us to leave.
It was a clear Labour landslide.
The car is covered in.
Liberated but left in ruins.
A major incident has been declared.
That's when misinformation floods the zone.
It became clear the media weren't welcome.
These extraordinary images.
Must have taken years.
Who wants to talk about politics?
OK, stand by.
I wouldn't be asking it if I didn't think it was a relevant question.
The winner of the 2024 presidential election.
Quite extraordinary events. Stand by.
Welcome back. Now, the Prime Minister has insisted that a trade deal with the United States doesn't mean that the UK is choosing the US over the EU. President Trump and Keir Starmer have hailed their deal as historic, but the leader of the Conservatives, Kemi Badenoch, has a different opinion. Well, let's bring in our political correspondent, Amanda Acas, for more on this. Morning to you, Amanda.
Morning.
Swerved that word twice now, but Kemi Badenoch's not very happy with this deal, is she? But the government see it as a win.
Absolutely. I think, in a way, we need to let Keir Starmer have his moment. He wants to celebrate this as a big diplomatic win, being first in the queue to sign some kind of trade deal with Donald Trump in the Oval Office, claiming it as a vindication of his kind of softly approach, not going in with that kind of bombastic criticism of the US government policies we've seen from many in the European Union and China and the escalation of the trade war we've seen there. And I think clearly in terms of the real-world impact of this, there's a reason that Keir Starmer went to the Jaguar Land Rover facility to have this bizarre video conference call with the US president as part of this kind of press conference. It's because the UK government claims that we were just days away from serious impacts on the UK car industry because of all these tariffs, with thousands of jobs potentially on the line. So they're arguing by signing this deal and reducing the tariffs on car exports to the US, those jobs have been saved. It's also been welcomed by the steel and aluminium industries, of course, as well. I think the other positive around this for the government, there was a lot of briefing ahead of time that we would see some kind of concession made around the taxes on social media firms in the US. That hasn't materialised. Always concerns, of course, about food standards being watered down. And yes, there has been a kind of deal around beef, but the government insists that food standards haven't been affected. However, for the Tories, they say the government has been shafted because fundamentally, compared to where we were before Donald Trump came into power, the UK is still paying much higher tariffs, whereas US tariffs on the UK have been dropped at the same time. There's reporting in the Telegraph today claiming that there's some kind of veto being offered by the UK on China's investment. But Number 10 this morning insisting that's not the case, that's not true. So I think clearly Sir Keir Starmer's off to Norway today. He'll be celebrating this on the international stage, but many, many questions and a lot more to come in the details.
Definitely, and some of those questions will be put to Darren Jones from the government later on, as well as Andrew Griffiths from the opposition. Amanda, for now, thank you for that. More from you in a bit when we do the paper review. But in this week's Electoral Dysfunction podcast, the team hash out some detail of that deal, but also on the agenda was a possible backbench rebellion by the Labour Party over the government's approach to welfare. Take a listen to what the team had to say.
On the one hand, I feel, oh, look, just shut up. It's bloody hard to be leader of the country in this difficult circumstance with Trump going on and terrible things going on in Ukraine and the economy is stuffed. Just give him a bit of a break and just back him up. On the one hand, I think just shut up and get on with it. But on the other hand, I think perhaps it is right to show the country that there is a breadth of view within the Labour Party and that there are different areas which are being represented. But we don't want to tip over into factionalism and we don't want to be undermining the Prime Minister. There's something about the tone of that Red Wall statement, which is a bit like, Keir Starmer, you need us to tell you how to do it. And I just think that's not a very welcome tone.
All right, well, still to come this morning on The Breakfast Show. We'll hear how the new Pope's brother reacted to his brother being appointed from Chicago, and
A memorable night for Tottenham in the Arctic Circle. They're through to the Europa League final where they'll play Manchester United.
The only way to Gaza for us right now is with the Israeli military. The IDF had brought us in to show us a tunnel network under a residential neighbourhood.
The length of time it must have to have created these tunnels must have taken years. At the end of the day, it's war at the top. It's war down here.
I'm Alistair Bunkle, Sky's Middle East correspondent based here in Jerusalem.
As we were filming, there was a gun battle in the next street.
This neighbourhood, the Israeli military say, was the stronghold of Hamas's Rafah brigade.
It was just after 6:30 a.m. when the first shots were fired.
I remember everything. It was a day that I don't think I'll ever be able to forget.
There's no moon, perfect conditions for smugglers and human traffickers trying to move fuel, weapons and people.
The valleys in between, they're some of the main smuggling routes.
After days of negotiation, a major smuggler here has agreed to meet us. The families that we've spoken to of people who have died trying to cross into Europe, they say you're a murderer. Are you a murderer?
No.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Begum was 15 when she left East London with 2 school friends to join Islamic State in Syria. Do you feel that you have committed a crime to the extent that you should serve time in a British prison?
I mean, I feel like the only crime I committed was coming here.
If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. I can take the heat. The second thing that Harry Truman said, was in politics, if you want a friend, get a dog.
My children will love a dog.
In Tel Aviv, a constant streak of interceptions filled the night sky as waves of missiles came in.
It appears to be a very, very large and sustained attack on Israel.
The big announcement, the battle for number 10.
The drone is above us.
It is a chaotic scene.
They've asked us to leave.
There is a clear Labour landslide.
The car is covered in.
Liberated but left in ruins.
A major incident has been declared.
That's when misinformation floods the zone.
It became clear the media weren't welcome.
These extraordinary images.
Must have taken years.
Who wants to talk about politics?
Okay, stand by.
I wouldn't be asking it if I didn't think it was a relevant question.
The winner of the 2024 presidential election.
Quite extraordinary events.
Hello there and welcome back. Our top stories this morning. Robert Prevost has become the first American elected as Pope. He's going to take the name of Leo XIV and will celebrate his first Mass this morning in the very room in which he was elected. Pakistan claims to have shot down Indian drones after an attack killed at least 2 civilians. But in what's become a tit for tat, India has accused Pakistan of attempting to hit military targets. And President Zelensky says a 30-day ceasefire will be a real indicator of President Putin's willingness for peace. It comes after a telephone call between President Zelensky and President Trump, in which the US leader echoed the call for 30 days of peace. A woman who survived being strangled by her former partner has spoken to Sky News for the first time, warning others about the escalation of violence in abusive relationships. Kerry Allen's story comes alongside an almost 50% increase in non-fatal strangulation and suffocation incidents.
Any sort of abuse isn't okay, whether it starts off emotional. They often start off that way and they escalate, and they can escalate badly. Take what happened to me as a huge warning sign.
Now, President Trump has congratulated the new Pope, calling his election a great honour for the United States. Pope Leo XIV is from Chicago, but spent decades living and working in Peru as a missionary and then as Archbishop. Our US correspondent, David Blevins, has more.
He was the dark horse candidate, appointed a cardinal bishop just 3 months ago, quietly rising to prominence in the days before the conclave. Many thought the cardinals would elect a European successor to the Argentinian Pope Francis. But they've turned again to the Americas, electing the first Pope from the United States. to the president's surprise.
What greater honour could there be? And we're a little bit surprised, but very happy. It's just a great, absolutely great honour.
69-year-old Robert Prevost holds both American and Peruvian citizenship. He's a former missionary to Latin America, home to 40% of the world's Roman Catholics.
I've been a missionary my whole life, and I was working in Peru. But I am American, and I think I do have some insights into the church in the United States.
He's centrist on key issues, but progressive like his predecessor in championing the marginalised. Destined for this calling, says his brother Louis, who had to wait with the rest of the world for the big reveal.
And when the cardinal came out and started to read his name, as soon as he went, "Raw," I knew, he was going to say, "Roberto," and he did, and I just freaked out and said, "It's Rob, oh my God." We've kind of known he was special, and we used to tease him about being Pope when he was 6 years old and stuff.
He is not without controversy, accused by victims of mishandling the issue of clerical abuse, and more recently, sharing social media posts questioning Vice President J.D. Vance's interpretation of Christianity. But the conclave has spoken and written a new chapter in history. Chicago is a long way from Rome, and few had predicted a pope from here. But his grasp of canon law won over the traditionalists, his common touch the reformists, and that made Robert Prevost the compromise candidate. Of the previous 266 popes, only 20 have served since America's Declaration of Independence. This nation, which leads the world in many ways, has never led the Church until now. Pope Leo XIV steps onto the stage and into a new era. David Blevins, Sky News in Chicago.
Time for the sport now. Let's have a look.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
Dowling's idea about coaches is an interesting one. 42% of Premier League first-team coaches across the last 6 seasons have been English. 56% have been British. The Premier League are also committed to coach development, launching an elite coaching plan in 2020 with a clear philosophy: better coaches lead to better players. Through that, they've supported 480 coaches and coach developers over the last 5 years. Alongside that, there's the Professional Coaching Partnership, bringing together the Premier League, FA, EFL, League Managers Association and others to offer further support for coaches. The League Managers Association, which represents managers in our top 4 divisions, told us they run a significant number of qualifications and personal development services for English coaches, all of which are oversubscribed, they say. But they admit that the football industry in this country is competitive, volatile and short-term. They say increased foreign ownership of English clubs and the purchasing power of English football mean clubs can scour the globe, and that has narrowed opportunities for home-developed coaches. The LMA say that whilst all the football authorities are committed to improving the situation, it's the clubs who need to do more. They need to recognise the rich seam of talent they have on their doorstep and provide environments that allow domestic coaching to develop and flourish. One of the long-standing complaints by aspiring coaches in this country surrounds the FA courses. Too expensive, not enough places, too much prevalence given to former players. So what exactly are the qualifications that you need? Beginners start on the Introduction to Coaching Football. Around 28,000 people do this a year at a cost of £100. Next is the UEFA C licence. Between 5,500 and 6,000 places are available. That one costs £650. 750 places are available on the UEFA B licence. This costs £1,200. You can manage in League 1 and League 2 with this qualification. The UEFA A licence costs climb to £4,000. 120 places are available on that course, and championship managers require that particular badge. And the highest qualification is the UEFA Pro licence. You need that to manage in the Premier League. UEFA set the number of places available at just 24 a season. It costs £13,700 to do. That's a huge financial outlay for coaches, and the FA Pro licence course is twice the price compared with Spain and Italy. But it's significantly cheaper than courses in Germany, France and the Netherlands. When places are awarded on each course every season, it causes significant debate on social media. Simon Goody has his A licence, but he had to go to Spain to get his badge, and having coached Fernando Torres' son at Atletico Madrid, he now works as head coach of SD.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Right, thank you for that, Jackie. We will see you in an hour's time. But for now, let's take a look at the weather.
The ideal atmosphere, whatever the altitude. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
It's going to be mainly dry for the next few days and it will be a bit warmer, but there is the possibility of some thunderstorms on Sunday. Mostly fine now, if a bit chilly, with low cloud across central and eastern England due to lift later. There'll be plenty of sunshine across the country this morning, but some fair weather cloud will bubble up by lunch. The odd shower is possible. It'll be light, with southwest Ireland most at risk. Warmer than recently, though, especially near eastern coast, but the far northwest and southeast will feel blustery.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
All right, well, still to come on The Breakfast Show this morning. We'll discuss some of the stories making headlines in the papers with Amanda and Jackie. Stay with us.
The only way to Gaza for us right now is with the Israeli military. The IDF had brought us in to show us a tunnel network under a residential neighbourhood.
The length of time it must have to have created these tunnels must have taken years. At the end of the day, it's war at the top. It's war down here.
I'm Alistair Bunkle, Sky's Middle East correspondent based here in Jerusalem. As we were filming, there was a gun battle in the next street.
This neighbourhood, the Israeli military say, was the stronghold of Hamas's Rafah brigade.
It was just after 6:30 a.m. when the first shots were fired.
I remember everything. It was a day that I don't think I'll ever be able to forget.
There's no moon, perfect conditions for smugglers and human traffickers trying to move fuel, weapons and people.
The valleys in between, they're some of the main smuggling routes.
After days of negotiation, a major smuggler here has agreed to meet us.
The families that we've spoken to of people who have died trying to cross into Europe, they say you're a murderer. Are you a murderer? No.
Sky News, get the full story first. Begum was 15 when she left East London with 2 school friends to join Islamic State in Syria.
Do you feel that you have committed a crime to the extent that you should serve time in a British prison?
I mean, I feel like the only crime I committed was coming here.
If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. I can take the heat. The second thing that Harry Truman said, was in politics, if you want a friend, get a dog.
My children will love a dog.
In Tel Aviv, a constant streak of interceptions filled the night sky as waves of missiles came in.
It appears to be a very, very large and sustained attack on Israel.
The big announcement, the battle for number 10.
The drone is above us.
It is a chaotic scene.
They've asked us to leave.
There is a clear Labour landslide.
The car is covered in.
Liberated but left in ruins.
A major incident has been declared.
That's when misinformation floods the zone.
It became clear the media weren't welcome.
These extraordinary images.
Must have taken years.
Who wants to talk about politics?
Okay, stand by.
I wouldn't be asking it if I didn't think it was a relevant question.
The winner of the 2024 presidential election.
Quite extraordinary events.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation future.
This is an actual crime. They don't care for that.
My army is only a couple of kilometres away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Do you know what kind of pollen gets up your nose? Sky News Pollen Reports, brought to you by the Kleenex Pollen Pal app.
Now, most places will begin fine enough today, if a bit chilly, but parts of central and the east of England will see some low cloud. That will soon lift through the morning, leave plenty of sunshine, but some fair weather cloud could bubble up later. It's going to be warmer than recently, especially near eastern coasts. The afternoon will be mainly fine, but the odd shower is possible in the southwest. We're between the oak and grass pollen seasons, with the settled conditions giving moderate to high levels falling to low across parts of the north.
Sky News Pollen Reports, brought to you by the Kleenex Pollen Pal app.
All right, it's time now for a look at some of the stories making headlines in the morning's papers. You can see Amanda and Jackie are here with me. Morning, guys.
Morning.
Lovely to be here with you both on the desk. Happy Friday to you. Let's start with one you picked out, Jackie. Sports and the papacy.
Well, we have to start with the Pope, don't we?
We do.
And he's a tennis player, apparently, a very good amateur tennis player. Big surprise, the election of Robert Prevost, also known as Father Bob to his friends, but no longer Father Bob, now Pope Leo, of course. And the discussion in this piece is that Catholic traditionalists were pretty confident that after the sort of radical turbulence of Pope Francis, there would be, you know, a move away from a progressive pope.
Yeah.
But this is the exact opposite. This is like a pope that was in training by Pope Francis. You know, he promoted him, and they think in a very similar way. So it'll be interesting to see what happens and what he does with the Catholic Church. He's anti-MAGA.
Oh, yeah, some of his tweets have come out, haven't they?
Yeah, some of his tweets have come out.
Right.
Anti-Trump and some of those messages. Little is known about his position on things like, which are becoming very important to the Catholic Church, like women's ordination, for example.
I think he's been against it up until this point.
And sexuality as well. So it'll be interesting to see if he takes it any further. You know, will there come a point where, you know, gay marriage in a Catholic Church is acceptable?
Mm-hmm. I mean, those questions will remain. As you say, I think he was seen as sort of a candidate that has been able to follow on from some of Francis's, but some of those progressive ideas that we thought that Francis may have had, and when it comes to women and gay people in the church, just never really came to fruition. Some of the words were said, but the changes never came about.
I think it also shows that he's a very good politician, because he's managed to sort of, you know, be in there and, you know, manipulate, not manipulate, wrong word, all of those cardinals into voting for him, when perhaps most people would have gone in with a position, we won't vote for that type of pope again.
And it's fascinating, the US perspective on this, isn't it? Donald Trump kind of welcoming him as an American, but of course he spent most of his career in Peru, and as you say, been very critical of some of the kind of Trump White House positions on the teachings of the church. In fact, sharing articles very critical of some of the things J.D. Vance said about sort of how it was more important to love those closer to you, and that was something that Jesus said, you know, which has caused a lot of controversy.
Well, he was slapped down by Pope Francis for saying those exact things.
Absolutely, really interesting there.
It is. So we'll see how it works out with two powerful Americans leading and perhaps, you know, disagreeing on the odd thing. All right, Amanda, let's move on to the front page of the Mail, and the inside page is there for that story about tennis playing Leo XIV. But this one is about the trade deal that has been signed.
The other big story around yesterday,
Americans.
Of course, yeah. So the papers, I thought it was interesting to pull out how the Mail have approached this trade deal that's been struck between the UK and the US, which, by and large, I think Number 10 will be pretty pleased with the headlines, sort of celebrating the fact that the UK is not the kind of big, beautiful deal that people were hoping for, or indeed had been promised or sold by President Trump, but at least the UK was at the front of the queue for a deal mitigating the impact of some, at least, of those tariffs for now, even though perhaps we're still in a worse position than we were before Trump came into office. But the Mail, their take on it is that this is a deal made by Brexit, which is something that Donald Trump himself said in the White House. Of course, he approves of the idea of Brexit because, of course, he's in sort of open warfare, really, with the European Union over this issue of tariffs and very critical of them, so likes the fact that the UK is, has forged its own path. And of course, it's only because of Brexit the UK can strike this separate deal. But Boris Johnson has given an interview when he's also been highlighting that. And so that's clearly the route the Mail have gone down as well, saying it's kind of ironic that this is something that is a celebration and a win for Sir Keir Starmer when, of course, he was so anti-Brexit. I think the government would say, well, this is the real world. This is a kind of pragmatic approach. They're trying to kind of bank the wing they could get to try and save jobs in the car industry. Obviously, they know there are many, many other issues. They've still got 10% tariffs across the board that they're still fighting on, but this is kind of the beginning of that process, as Lord Mandelson said yesterday. Also, interesting details that many of the papers kind of highlighting the fact that this was a deal that had been sort of supposedly struck last week but hadn't been signed off by Trump. Then Sir Keir Starmer gets the call during that match between Arsenal and
I love it. That's one of my favourite points.
Take that, it's a huge match.
The team's already losing. You're about to go out of Europe and let's take a call from the president
on the phone, and then, to scramble to get this kind of press conference going in the JLR factory. Journalists sent to the wrong one, even, and then
they were sent to the wrong.
They were initially sent to one 15 miles down the road. Everyone rocked up in the car park, was set up in the wrong place. I mean, the whole thing clearly very last minute, but he did manage to get that. There's rather extraordinary optics of being on this kind of slightly awkward video call in the Oval Office, but being praised by President Trump talking about
they seem like they're very tight still, don't they? And there's another line as well in the Mail here that has been sort of rumbling along for a bit this week about the film industry. Apparently, that's escaped any kind of tariffs for now.
Well, I think it's more that the US have been threatening this, but they haven't actually specified anything concrete. So the UK can't really come up with a deal to mitigate that, but clearly they're hoping. There was this kind of question about whether James Bond should be worried, and at the moment the mood music is good, but still questions about film, pharmaceutical industry as well.
Yeah, not worried. Not much worries James Bond, I don't think.
No.
Pretty chill guy. All right, what are we looking at now, Amanda? Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's also on the trade deal, and this is in the Eye, and it's talking about how Trump was softened up by the royal family because he's such a royalist.
Then hanging out with Prince William.
Won over by golf and the royal family. So the deal's done, but, the royal family did play their part, and I truly believe this, this could be true. Prince William, softened him up because he was sent on a kind of charm offensive to the reopening of Notre Dame. And there was a meeting in the British ambassador's residence in Paris for about 40 minutes. They had a chat, Prince William and Donald Trump there. King Charles has been exchanging letters, according to this, with Donald Trump for a long time. And there's the state visit, which they're trying to iron out. They now think it will be September when the state visit will happen, and he can come over and see his golf courses as well. But you just think going forward that this tactic may well be used again.
Oh, it's great, isn't it? I mean, it's a very transactional man, isn't he? And people say that he's running his own court in the United States, so perhaps meeting other royalty around the world makes him feel at home.
I mean, this is British soft power, isn't it? I mean, this is if you can't use the royal family to help, save tens of thousands of British jobs in the automotive industry and kind of try and get a trade deal, that you could argue that's a key part of their role. So that's good that's worked. Hopefully,
definitely could argue that. All right, let's move on. Amanda, story here in the Guardian.
Yes, so although on the international front things seem to be going fairly well for Sir Keir Starmer at the moment, domestically he's still under huge pressure since those disastrous local election results, of course, but also we've seen real criticism really breaking out into the open, perhaps really for the first time en masse, with many backbench MPs angry about the cuts to winter fuel payments, of course. But now this public statement signed by 42 Labour MPs raising big criticism about the welfare cuts which are coming. There's going to be a big vote in June, and there's a suggestion that we could see quite a big rebellion brewing over that, with these MPs really calling on the government to delay it, to work more closely with disabled rights organisations to try and mitigate some of the worst impact on that, saying it's something that just can't be supported, they believe, at the moment, because they think it's going to cause more hardship to some of the most vulnerable in society. Effectively, it's the government really tightening up eligibility for those payments which help people who are living with a long-term illness or disability. The government say they want to help support people. They're putting money into helping people get back into work, but it's causing a lot of concern. And the government haven't really had any big rebellions yet so far. But I think the real thought is that this could be the one that actually brings it into the open, although still they've got a massive majority.
I was going to say, is it going to be enough to scupper
I don't think they're going to lose it, but it could be damaging.
But getting it through with the support of the opposition will not look good.
No, it's uncomfortable,
right?
yeah.
for those that want to. All right, I've been told we only have a few minutes left, and I know there are 2 stories that you all want to get to, so let's move on. You're pointing at food. I mean, I'm hungry. You're pointing at a fryer up there.
Oh, I was actually pointing at Tom Cruise.
Oh, right, sorry. Makes you hungry for a different reason.
OK, if the fryer's part of the story, this is true. Tom Cruise getting ready to toast the relaunch of Mission Impossible, 20 million, whatever number it is.
I stopped watching them about 4 ago.
He's revealed that the sort of trick to doing his own stunts and doing things like wing walking and getting really cold where he does those stunts quite often.
Is impressive?
Is very impressive. Is a big fry-up. So he said, I eat a lot in the morning, massive breakfast, sausage, bacon, and almost a dozen eggs.
That's too many eggs, surely.
Who could actually eat a dozen eggs in one sitting?
How can you?
He sounds like Gaston from
how
Beauty
many
and the
could you
Beast.
eat, honestly?
So look, honestly, when I'm having like scrambled eggs, I'll put 6 in there, but I might share that with one other people.
Not yourself.
I mean, there may have been a time when I do 6 eggs scrambled.
Presenting Sky News wing walking as the same level of energy.
Exactly, that's what I mean. We didn't even get a chance to talk about the cats, did we?
Let me just say
quickly on the cats.
Young people love cats. At the moment, there's 13.5 million dogs in the UK, 12.5 million cats, but the suggestion is the cats are beginning to overtake the dogs. Look at Taylor Swift with her lovely cat. Look at Miley Cyrus with her lovely cat.
Let's do a quick straw poll. Cats or...
Cat all the way.
Dogs, but I've got both. I've got both.
So you're fine, and I'm going to sit on the fence. I love animals equally. That's not true. All right, guys, Jackie, Amanda, thanks plenty. More in the next hour of the programme.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Hello there and good morning. It is 7 a.m. and on today's programme, the Catholic Church has a new leader and he'll lead Mass later.
And in sports, it's an all-English Europa League final after wins for both Manchester United and Tottenham.
It is Friday, the 9th of May. Pope Leo XIV leads his first Mass this morning after becoming the first ever pontiff from the United States. Indian claims of attacks along its western border are denied by Pakistan. Sky News hears from a survivor of a rising form of domestic violence, non-fatal strangulation. She's urging others to notice the signs.
Any sort of abuse isn't okay, whether it starts off emotional. They often start off that way and they escalate, and they can escalate badly. Take what happened to me as a huge warning sign.
Presidents Zelensky and Trump push for a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine, while in Russia, they're preparing for their Victory Day parade, which starts in an hour or so's time. We'll have coverage of it live.
And in sport, there's an English team in the Conference League final as well, after Chelsea eased past the Swedish side, Djurgården.
Hello, good morning, and thank you for joining us on the Breakfast programme. Now, the Pope is to celebrate his first Mass as head of the Catholic Church in the very room in which he was elected. Well, the cardinals are going to join Pope Leo XIV in the Sistine Chapel after he became the first person from the United States to become pontiff. Siobhan Robbins has our top story.
He arrived as a cardinal, but emerged as a pope. This is the moment the world saw the face of the new leader of the Catholic Church, stepping onto the balcony to the roar of the waiting crowd in St. Peter's Square. Cardinal Robert Prevost, the first American pope, the first Augustinian. With a simple gesture, he greeted the thousands gathered below. For some, the emotion of the day was overwhelming. And briefly, the pontiff too looked overcome by the enormity of the moment. Before he offered his first message to the world as Pope Leo XIV.
Peace be with all of you.
A message of peace for some, perhaps an echo of another who stood on this balcony.
Fratelli, sorelle carissimi. Brothers and sisters, dear brothers and sisters, this is the first greeting of Christ resurrected, the good pastor who gave life for the Lord.
Pope Francis, a man who also fought for the poor and vulnerable, the predecessor who Leo paid tribute to.
The Papa Francesco. And Pope Francis, in fact, was always courageous, and he blessed Rome. The Pope that blessed Rome gave this blessing to the world, to the whole world on that Easter morning.
The announcement was the climax of a long day for watchers packed into Vatican City. Just over 24 hours after conclave started, the signal came that the 133 cardinals had picked a new pope.
White smoke, and with that, the sign that the life of one cardinal has changed forever. He is now one of the most powerful men in the world, the leader of 1.4 billion Catholics.
Leo, a papal name that historically signifies strength during a crisis, a moderate pope that some hoped would be a unifying force.
He spoke many times about Francis, so it's kind of a continuity. And it's also because he prayed for everybody, for all. This is a continuity also with Francis, with the spirit of the Pope Francis.
And that excitement would carry long into the night. As Rome celebrates its bishop.
Patris et Filii
et Spiritus Sancti descendat super vos et maniat semper.
Leo XIV, a pope of the new world, bringing promise of a new chapter for the Catholic Church. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News, Vatican City.
And of course, we'll have more coverage from the Vatican throughout the day here on Sky News. Well, to India now, and that government says that Pakistan launched multiple attacks along the shared border between the two nations using drones and other munitions. Pakistan, for its part, has rejected the claims. Well, world leaders are urging the two nuclear-armed countries to show restraint. But speaking to Sky's Yalda Hakim last night, the Indian High Commissioner to the UK says the bill is firmly in Pakistan's court.
We have made it abundantly clear in our official statement, again, as I said, both yesterday and today. We're not looking for an escalation, but if Pakistan responds, as we have done, we will respond proportionately and in exactly the same line.
Which would be what? Targeting these terror bases or
Well,
not?
look, if we have said if the military is attacked, we had not attacked their military. As they've now started trying to attack our bases, we've hit back at their air defense systems and at their units too.
Well, in a moment, we're going to get the perspective from India by speaking to our reporter there, Neville Lazarus. But first, let's go to Pakistan and bring in our Asia correspondent, Cordelia Lynch, joining us from Lahore. Cordy, good to have you with us. What is the situation there where you are, and what truths are there to those claims of strikes along the border overnight?
Well, I'm in Lahore. This is Pakistan's second largest city, home to about 14 million people. This is where US service personnel have been told to shelter in place, and that is in the wake of what Pakistan claims are more than 24 drones that they claim to have shot down that have been sent from India. These were surveillance drones, and I think this has certainly been the location of a lot of anxiety and tension. It is close to the border with India. It's a densely populated area with a lot of civilians, and I think the actions by India into Lahore have caused some concern. But overnight we have had claim and counterclaim, both India and Pakistan, alleging that their military sites have come under attack. We heard from India last night, just as we were arriving in Punjab province where we are, that Kashmir and Jammu had come under attack by Pakistan, something that the Pakistanis refute. They said late last night, the defence minister in an interview, that if we do attack India, the world will know, that they will make clear what they have done. But I sense there is a deep sense of distrust. There's a lot of confrontation and rhetoric that we're already seeing playing out. Meanwhile, on the political world stage, you have the likes of Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State for America, urging immediate de-escalation. Now, both India and Pakistan maintain that they are not seeking to escalate the situation here, but it is fragile, it is precarious, no one quite knows what might come next, and that is the concern, particularly in a place like here in Lahore that is so close to that border and with so many civilians.
All right, Cordelia, for now in Lahore, thank you for that. Well, let's go to New Delhi and bring in Neville. Neville, on that final point that Cordy was making there about this attempted outreach by Marco Rubio and others to try and mitigate, bring down the tensions between the two, has there been any reaction from the Indian governments to those efforts?
Not yet. There hasn't been any official reaction to that. In fact, this morning, the three military chiefs, the three chiefs of the military, the Air Force, Army and Navy have been meeting with the defense minister out here. We haven't heard from the Prime Minister's office yet on what the Secretary of State has said. But earlier on in the previous hour, there were air raid sirens going off in Chandigarh, which is one of the largest large city in the state of Punjab and is the capital of Punjab and Haryana both, and people were asked to remain indoors. Now this is obviously an escalation. Till yesterday, till afternoon, we saw sort of a lull in the sort of intense hostilities between the two countries that were taking place earlier on, but then it just picked up later in the afternoon and evening. India saying that they thwarted 8 missile and several drone attacks that came from Pakistan. There has been some damage, but they haven't clarified how much. There has been also very heavy shelling and by mortar and artillery shelling across the line of control. India claims 1 woman was killed along this 740-kilometer border, which has both militaries trained their guns at each other. It's been pretty intense, and this is the 3rd day of intense firing by these large artillery and mortar shells. Previously, we've seen small arms fire between the two countries since the 22nd of April, when that horrendous attack took place in Kashmir, where 26 people were killed. And since then, India has said that it is taking out terror infrastructure in Pakistan and conducted those strikes. But still, it is a very precarious situation out here, and there is still a lot of tension.
It most certainly is. All right, Neville, for now in New Delhi, thank you for that. And of course, we'll have more from the region throughout the day here on Sky News. We keep a close eye on the increasing tension between India and Pakistan. All right, let me bring you some of the other headlines this morning. And bin workers in Birmingham are doing this, forming a large picket as the strike there by refuse collectors enters its 5th month. Well, the negotiations to end the dispute have stalled. The latest talks on Tuesday failed to find any resolution. As you can see, there are people out there from unions, as well as, I'm sure, people who work within refuse collection who are continuing to put down their tools and not work, as there is no resolution to this 5-week-long bin strike. In sight. Health bosses warn NHS England is planning previously unthinkable cuts in an attempt to balance the books. NHS providers, so this includes a reduction in patient services, like for diabetes care for young people, as well as rehab centres. Cuts to frontline staff and overtime for doctors are also expected, putting the drive to cut hospital waiting lists at risk. The British Retail Consortium say there's been a small increase in foot traffic in shops. High streets are up 0.2% in March and April compared to the same months last year, with visits to retail parks up 2.7%. And the government is hoping plans to shorten the length of apprenticeships will get more teachers into the classrooms. From August, courses will only be 9 months, down from a year. The move comes after Labour's pledge to recruit an additional 6,500 teachers over the next few years. Now, President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that a 30-day ceasefire will be a real indicator of whether or not President Putin wants peace. The call for that 30-day pause was echoed by President Trump after a phone call between the two leaders last night.
Ukraine is ready for a full ceasefire starting right now, from this very moment. A 30-day silence, but it must be real. The Russians must respond appropriately by supporting the ceasefire. 30 days that could become the beginning of years of peace.
Meanwhile, in Russia, in Moscow's Red Square, preparations are being made for today's huge military parade. It's going to mark Victory Day in Russia, as they mark the moment that the Soviet Union defeated Nazi Germany. Well, world leaders are currently arriving ahead of the parade. It's due to start at 8 a.m. UK time, as you can see there in the side panel. We've got some live picture of it, and if you want to follow along, you can scan that QR code. We'll have live coverage of it from 8 a.m. as well for some of the Victory Day's commemorations. Now, here, and the Prime Minister is insisting a trade deal with the United States doesn't mean choosing the US over the EU. President Trump and Keir Starmer have hailed the deal between the two nations as historic, but the leader of the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch, says that the UK has been shafted. Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, has more.
Now, at this stage, you're probably wondering just how much of a big deal is this? And if you look at the total amount of stuff that Britain has traditionally exported to the US, well, here it is. Over the past 5 years, £273 billion worth. And if we break it down, look, cars, that's the biggest chunk of it. So just under £30 billion in cars. You've got steel and aluminium. They're not going to face tariffs, but it's only £2.7 billion. Jet engines, so some of them, particularly Rolls-Royce, that's going to be covered by this as well. So you can see the amount that this covers is building up. But then you've got something like beef. So a lot of talk about what this is going to mean for access to the US market for beef. That is tiny in comparison with everything else. And then there's the areas where they haven't yet been negotiated, but there's an intention to try and negotiate them, like pharmaceuticals. Toss all of that up. This is kind of best-case scenario stuff in terms of how much is affected by this. And you're talking about £75 billion worth, give or take, of that total over the last 5 years, which is just over a quarter. So that is what is affected by this. And the rest, that still faces those tariffs of 10%. But actually, it's a bit more complicated than that. So take cars, OK? So the tariff on cars used to be 2.5% before this latest Donald Trump measure. Then, of course, that's gone up to 25%. So that's really tough. Under this deal, for the UK, it could well be down to 10%. So better than 25% for those car exports to the US, but certainly not as good as the 2.5% there was before. And it still gets more complicated after that because it's not all car exports to the US that are going to have that lower tariff. In fact, anything up to 100,000 cars a year is going to have the 10%, but anything above that line is going to be 25%. And if you look historically, in every year going back the last decade or so, we have exported more than 100,000 cars to the US. So you see, it's complicated.
Ed Conway reporting. Let's bring in Darren Jones, Chief Secretary of the Treasury. Darren, morning to you. Thanks so much for being with us. As Ed said there at the end, it is complicated. There's still bits to be ironed out in this, right?
Yes, this is the start of a set of negotiations with the United States. It's a really important deal at this stage because we had key sectors in the UK economy, car manufacturing, steel, aluminium, that were obviously deeply worried about the tariffs that had been originally put in place. We've been able to lift that pressure for those workers and those businesses in the UK, which is a great deal. But of course, there's more we want to do, and we want to go further in respect of more broader tariffs, but also other sectors like technology, and our officials will continue to negotiate on that basis.
I mean, the tariffs will stay in place, though, still, so we're still in a worse position than we were before Liberation Day.
Well, you have to deal with the world as you find it, not as you would like it to be. President Trump, as we know, put in these global tariffs in relation to the US economy. That's his decision to be able to do that. The important news for us today is that in those key sectors on steel, aluminium, car manufacturing, you know, this is over, I think it's nearly 150,000 people's jobs in the UK, 150,000 families today who will be relieved at the fact that we've been able to get those tariffs down, get a great deal for those sectors, so they can continue working in those jobs where they get well paid and it's good for them and their families.
Of course, protection of jobs is essential. But when is this going to come into force? We know that Donald Trump, let's call him mercurial, likes to change his mind sometimes. When do we think that there will be these changes that we can rely upon?
Well, this is a heads of terms arrangement. We've agreed the principles of that. There's a bit more work to do. We're going to be working at pace to be able to get that locked down. We're going to have to come back to Parliament as well because Parliament has to have a look at some of these details.
Have a look or a vote?
It's quite wonky. It's something called the CRAG, the Constitutional Reform and Governance process. There's a process for Parliament in scrutinising treaties via select committees where they can be involved in that.
But will
you should get the CRAG process up on the screen because I think even MPs were not entirely in the detail, but they get a role.
They get a role, but no votes. As you know, there's calls from some of the opposition for there to be a vote on this deal.
Yeah, look, we should ask them what they mean by that, because it won't be a traditional debate in the House of Commons. There's a very technical process for international treaties. called this CRAG process, but we should maybe come back to that another time.
We'll come back to that another time. You can come back and explain exactly what CRAG means. Darren, and you didn't tell me when it's going to come into effect.
Because we've just got to work through that detail now.
6 months?
We'd like it to be as quickly as possible. The important point, though, for those sectors in the UK is they now have clarity that that is going to be the outcome. Of course, we've got to work out the detail and the wiring, but that will be the outcome. And that's given certainty already to businesses to be able to get back to thinking about exporting those cards and trading on that basis, which is why, for example, Jaguar Land Rover yesterday was very welcoming of the announcements that the Prime Minister's been able to secure.
I mean, I think the steel industry is still a little bit concerned as to exactly when that will come in, because, of course, the amount that is being sent both ways is vitally important. So some clarity for that industry will be vital as soon as you can.
Sure, look, and government officials will work with the relevant sectors and trade bodies to give them updates as we're going through the detail on this. But I say the good news is that the headline agreement, that those tariffs are down, that those sectors are being protected, that those workers and those businesses in the UK and those crucial manufacturing sectors are going to be able to continue doing the work that they're doing. That is the good news that we've been able to confirm today. As I say, some of the detail will come shortly, but we'll work at pace to get that sorted.
A little bit more detail on agricultural changes. Confirm or not whether or not hormone-treated beef is going to be on sale in the UK in the future?
Our food standards stay exactly the same. So where we weren't able to import these types of things in the past, we're not importing them in the future. So we do not need to worry about that. We were very clear that we were not going to be changing our food standards in the UK. It's not something the government wants to do. It's not something the public wants us to do. We're not going to be doing that.
So it was interesting, in the news conference yesterday, Jameson Greer said that, you know, there could be some accommodation for things coming in to make products available to some consumers which aren't currently available. It suggested to me that there would be some negotiation potentially further down the line that some of that hormone-treated beef or chlorinated chicken could come in.
We're not changing our food standards.
Definitely not happening.
No.
Definitely not happening. OK, well, we'll wait and see. Talk to us about the film industry, because there was some concern that would be impacted by Donald Trump, and this goes back to his mercurial thing, I guess.
Well, look, the creative sectors is a hugely important part of the UK economy. We're probably one of the best countries in the world in terms of the exports of our film, our theatre, our music and our art. We know this is something that's really, really important to the UK, but also something really important to the world. The good news is that there has been no change for that sector. There had been some suggestion coming out of the United States that there may be tariffs on the film industry, the creative sector. That has not happened.
At this point?
Sure, and look, we're going to continue making the case for that. That has not happened. That is good for UK creative art. And I think President Trump said yesterday that James Bond has got nothing to worry about, so we'll take that and run with it.
Bond doesn't worry about much, but, I mean, the rest of the film industry may be slightly concerned. Look, you saw what happened yesterday. You saw this news conference via video call with Sir Keir Starmer in a factory in the West Midlands and Trump in the Oval Office. I mean, some people looked on that and cringed a little bit. It's a bit of pantomime, wasn't it?
Well, no, I think it's an important part of the process.
What, to play a role in his pantomime of politics?
Well, we had a call with Narendra Modi when we did the deal with India on Monday. No one was saying that was pantomime. I think it's important when you're announcing these big deals between countries that the heads of our country, the Prime Minister of India, the President of the United States, they want to celebrate that. There's a lot of work that goes into these things, trying to get these things across the line. And it's great news for all of our economies when we're able to do so. So I think it was just a normal part of the process, to be frank.
So none of the theatre made you feel a little bit awkward? I mean, some people... No?
No.
People looked on and they're thinking, oh, what's going on? It may have been hastily arranged as well, that call during the Arsenal match. Sir Keir mentioned that again. He wasn't very happy to receive a call from the President as his team's losing.
I mean, look, the Prime Minister is very committed to watching Arsenal, but he's also very committed to the country, which is why he was able to come out and get this deal across the line.
All right, let me talk to you about some other topics, if we can. First of all, the situation between India and Pakistan. We heard Jonathan Reynolds, I think in this very studio, saying last night that the UK stands ready. What steps have actually been made to speak to both sides at this point?
Well, look, the Foreign Office will have been doing the work that it always does in these situations. We have delegations and ambassadors in both countries. And evidently, our position is that we want to make sure that that this is deconflicted, that the escalation is dialed down. No one wants another conflict in another part of the world. This never works in anyone's interests. Of course, India and Pakistan are independent countries and they will make their own decisions, but in the same way that the UK government and our Foreign Office officials try to support peace and peaceful processes in other parts of the world, whether it's Ukraine, Middle East, or now in India and Pakistan, look, we'll continue to make that case and offer any help that we can.
Is there nervousness? Is there fear that it just seems to be ratcheting up? Neither side seems willing at this point to back down. In fact, both sides seem to say that if you attack us, we will attack you back, and that only leads in one direction.
Yeah, look, this is never great, right? And it's in the interests, I think, of everybody involved, but also for the global economy and for geopolitics, that we live in a world of peace and not conflict. Unfortunately, we're in a period now where conflict is more frequent than it has been in the past, and so we should all be doing whatever we can to try to reduce that, and we'll do our best to help that along the way.
A final question for you on what's happening in Moscow today in the wider Ukraine war. There's been some concern, some fear that the Ukrainians may well try and target these Victory Day celebrations in Red Square. Would that be a legitimate military target, do you think, for the Ukrainians to strike?
Look, it's not for me to comment on legitimate or illegitimate military targets, but evidently, much like in our conversation with India and Pakistan, we're applying a lot of pressure on President Putin around this illegal invasion, that it needs to come to an end. We're working with President Trump and our allies. You've seen the Prime Minister lean into this very significantly since we've come into government, to provide that global leadership to try to bring peace in Ukraine, and we just want to make sure that everybody's pointing in the same direction on that.
Okay, Darren Jones, we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks for being with us. All right, now, in this week's Electoral Dysfunction podcast, the team have been speaking about that trade deal, but also on the agenda was some potential backbench anger in the Labour Party. Baroness Harriet Harman said Redwall MPs should push for the two-child benefit cap to be lifted rather than the reversal of the winter fuel payment policy.
I think they'll probably come out not changing it on the basis that the damage has already been done. To remedy it might not make the difference and might cause further problems, but it does mean they need to do something else. For example, it puts more pressure on them delivering on the child poverty strategy, and we're expecting to have that next month. So it might be, we've really annoyed pensioners, but a lot of them have got grandchildren. Everybody cares about child poverty, so it puts more pressure on going forward. All
right, let's take a look at the weather.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, the next few days look mainly dry, but it'll turn warmer. There are thunderstorms possible on Sunday. Mostly fine today, if a little chilly, with early low cloud across central and eastern England lifting. There'll be plenty of sunshine across the country this morning, but some fair weather cloud will bubble up by lunch. Then the odd light shower is possible, with south-west islands most at risk. It will be warmer, though, than recently, especially near the eastern coasts, but the far northwest and the southeast will be blustery. The afternoon will be mainly fine, but southwest island will see a few showers.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
All right, still to come on The Breakfast Show this morning. From Parliament to the front line in Ukraine, we'll be speaking to the former MP, Jack Lepresti. And could we see the violence escalate between India and Pakistan? We'll talk to the former National Security Advisor of Pakistan. and welcome back. Our main story this morning, and Robert Prevost has become the first American to be elected leader of the Catholic Church. He will take the name of Leo XIV. He's going to celebrate his first Mass this morning in the very room in which he was elected. India says that Pakistan has launched multiple attacks along their shared border overnight using drones and other munitions. Pakistan rejects the claims. World leaders are urging the two nations to show restraint. And President Zelensky says a 30-day ceasefire will be the real indicator of whether or not President Putin wants peace in Ukraine. It comes after Zelensky and Trump spoke on the phone last night. Following that, President Trump echoed Zelensky's calls for a 30-day unconditional ceasefire. Well, the Prime Minister has insisted a trade deal with the United States doesn't mean choosing the US over the EU. Keir Starmer says that the new measures could save thousands of jobs in the car and steel industries, both of which were threatened by Trump's tariffs. Well, Ashna has joined us now to talk about a troubling rise in one form of domestic violence. Ashna.
Yeah, we're talking this morning about strangulation. It's the second most common method that's used to kill women in the UK, second to the use of knives. Last year, when it came to cases of domestic abuse, there was a 50% rise in the number of incidents that involved people being strangled compared to the year before. And a recent review looking into pornography found that strangulation was increasingly being normalised and often glamorised, and it's seeping now into young relationships, with kids asking teachers in schools, how do we safely strangle somebody? Incredibly worrying, incredibly scary. 38% of young women saying that they, in their intimate relationships, had been choked. At the same time, whilst you've got this so-called consensual, non-consensual debate around strangulation, charities would argue you absolutely cannot safely strangle somebody. You have got this prevalence within domestic abuse relationships, and we are going to introduce viewers to a woman called Kerry, who survived as a domestic abuse victim, but she also survived being strangled 3 times within that relationship. And she has spoken to us for the first time about her warnings to other people in her situation, talking to them about the escalation of violence in these abusive relationships, and just a warning that some of that material is very distressing.
This is Kerry and a man she thought she trusted. But their year-long whirlwind relationship culminated in one horrifying night in August last year, when during an argument, after Kerry confronted Michael Cosgrove about texting other women, he started to repeatedly strangle her.
And he was still ranting and raving, saying he was going to kill me. How he hoped I knew he was dead. He was going to kill me and then he was going to kill himself. I wasn't getting out of this bedroom alive. And I remember screaming as loud as I could. And as soon as I did that, his hands were over my mouth and he was on top of me on the bed. And his hands were around my throat again. But this time he didn't stop. And then the next thing I remember is just being awake and the room was full of police and paramedics.
Cosgrove had left her unconscious and fled by jumping out of the window. He was later found hiding in the boot of her car. His actions burst blood vessels in Kerry's eye and left her covered in bruises with a fractured rib. Her struggle evident from her snapped nails.
It was easy for me in my head to downplay what he'd done to me because I couldn't face thinking about it. What happened to me that night was always going to happen. I just wish that I'd recognised the signs sooner.
Strangulation is the second most common method used by men to kill women. It can form part of a pattern of abuse Bernie is used to seeing.
It's the ultimate form of control, isn't it? If you think that your life is going to be taken away from you, literally, and in the hands of the person that you trust the most or that you're in a relationship with, then that's really scary. We hear lots of sex education providers, teachers saying that they're hearing it in schools.
Violent pornography has contributed to young people being exposed to strangulation and choking, but it has always been associated with domestic abuse.
I've seen victims who thought they've imagined or dreamt what's happened to them, and that feeling of being completely out of control of what's happened to your body at the hands of somebody else, you can imagine how terrifying that must be.
This is the police! Make yourself known!
Cosgrove was found guilty of attempting to murder and intentionally strangling Kerry. She now wants other survivors of abuse to recognise the signs.
Any sort of abuse isn't okay, whether it starts off emotional. They often start off that way and they escalate, and they can escalate badly. Take what happened to me as a huge warning sign.
Kerry says she's been given a second chance at life. Not all her scars are visible, but she hopes in time they will heal.
All right, now back to the invasion of Ukraine. And ever since President Putin carried that action out, people have been travelling there from all across the world to help Ukrainians in a variety of ways. And one of those people is the former MP Jack Lepresti, who joined the International Brigade and will soon be going back. I mean, soon as in today.
This afternoon, I will be joining an aid convoy run by a charity. I'm a patron of Ukrainian Action. They've been running convoys pretty much every 2 weeks for the last 3 years. This will be the 75th one, and it'll be my third convoy.
Right.
So we'll take vehicles back to Ukraine.
Let's go back to why you first decided to go to Ukraine.
Well, I mean, I did a lot during my last 2 years in Parliament for Ukraine. My constituents, my former constituency, organised a lot of the procurement and the weapons and the kit which went. So I thought if I were unsuccessful in my re-election, I'd still like to help in any way I can. And in November, I volunteered to join the International Legion.
Do you have a military background?
I've done some military service. I was a reservist for about 6 years, and I served in Afghanistan on Herrick 9, which was 2008-9. So I've done a bit of military service.
So you've been stationed abroad, you've seen what it's like working within armed forces.
Yeah.
How does the work within Ukraine compare to that? I mean, this is probably the most active war that you've...
Well, indeed, but I'm not quite... I mean, I'm obviously a lot older than I was then, and I'm doing more of a sort of liaison, diplomatic procurement role. So I spend most of my time in Kiev, but I go east when I can. I've been involved in some drone operations and seeing some of our kit being used.
Right. I mean, and drone warfare is so hugely important.
It is.
I think it's the number one munition now for on either side.
Well, it's sort of a drone artillery war rather than, you know, a face-to-face one.
What's it like in Kiev?
Kiev, you know, the population are getting on with their daily lives stoically and heroically. I think, you know, obviously people are tired. It's been going on for a long time, the war, and you have air raid warnings sometimes several times a day and during the night. But, you know, I'm astonished by the morale of the civilian population of Ukraine and the military. I mean, they are absolutely steadfast and determined to continue the fight if they have to remain a free nation for their own existence. It is inspirational.
You came back, what was it, 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, I came back, I had a couple of weeks' work I've done, and I had a week's leave in the middle, which I spent in the West Country.
So you were there when there was this sort of seeming back-and-forth prevarication from the United States as to whether or not the support was going to continue, blaming Ukraine for starting the war in places.
Which was just staggering. I could hardly believe what I was seeing on the television. It was just astonishing.
And how did the Ukrainians you were with?
It made them even more determined, and I don't think the Americans realise, or the leadership around Trump's team, that the Ukrainians are prepared to continue to fight on their own if they have to. They realise, you know, how stark the challenge is. It's either survive, be free, be independent, or be a vassal state of Putin's Russia.
Did they feel they were going to be abandoned? Did you get that sense from them, or were they sort of optimistic that it would all come right?
We were all optimistic with the change of administration. You know, we thought somebody like Trump, who portrays himself as a strong man and wants to end the war,
doesn't like wars,
would be a positive thing. But our darker fears were realised when we saw some of the antics which were displayed.
It was the closeness to Putin as well, and the seeming lack of willingness to criticise him. I mean, how did that make Ukrainians feel? Because they must have felt something.
Well, it made us very angry, and it made us even more determined. I mean, it made the country even more, if possible, united behind President Zelensky, and willing to fight to survive.
I mean, a result of what Trump has done for the past 100 or so days is that Europe's stepping up its military spending, the UK stepping up its military spending. How much higher does that need to go, do you think, in terms of support for Ukraine and also protection for...
Well, for many years, I mean, during the whole time I was in Parliament, there was this constant debate about, the UK and European nations not doing enough as far as our commitment to NATO. We obviously have stepped up our defence spending dramatically. but we need to do a lot more.
But it was true, wasn't it, Jack, that there wasn't enough done? We've been covering this war since the very beginning, and all of my questions, all to anyone involved with it, was when is rearmament in Europe going to...
Absolutely. I was calling for, our defence manufacturing industry to be put on a war footing 2 years ago, and that's where it needs to be, and it isn't. I mean, we're hearing all the right things, and the government's sincere, and I'm very proud of what they're doing, which I'd see when I'm in Ukraine. But we need to move on from the rhetoric now and actually really start to build up what we're producing here, helping the Ukrainians produce their own kit and equipment, more of it. I mean, they have, I think, 40% of what the Ukrainians use now is produced in Ukraine. Obviously, we need to help them do more.
Yeah, their own industry.
So we're not spending enough by any means.
More money needs to be spent. And how are Ukrainians feeling currently? The US taps have been turned on again. There is support coming. But I guess they still feel very uncertain that will continue.
What this does is make them even more determined, all of us, essentially. And they know that they've got the support of the UK, of most of the European, if not all of the European nations. The US is an issue, but if need be, they will continue on their own, but they won't be entirely on their own because they've got the UK and other European nations stepping up, but they need to move quicker.
Jack, I wish you all the best. And
thank you.
Stay safe, and we'll speak to you again soon. And
thank you.
All the best to those in Ukraine. Thank you for being with us. Jack Lepresti, back to Ukraine today. Well, we can go now to Moscow, and as you can see there, President Putin greeting world leaders as Russia marks Victory Day, the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany in 1945, marked on the 9th of May, because that is when Joseph Stalin decided that the agreement should be signed for the surrender of Nazi Germany. President Putin there with one of his closest allies, Alexander Lukashenko from Belarus. We'll keep an eye on what's happening in Moscow. Indoors now, they'll be out on Red Square pretty soon, and we will have live coverage of that as they commemorate Victory Day in Moscow. For now, let's bring in Andrew Griffiths, Shadow Business and Trade Secretary.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. Thanks so much for being with us. Look, so this deal has been broadly welcomed by the sectors it affects. You must welcome it too.
I certainly welcome it for the sectors it affects. It's very limited in scope. It's a tariff reduction deal. I think Ed Conway's been talking about the limitations of scope. So whilst it's good for automotive and for steel, it still leaves British business across the board with higher tariffs than 2 months ago. Real uncertainty for the pharmaceutical industry, nothing about TV and film, where we heard earlier this week about 100% tariffs. So look, Conservatives support free trade. We think we're all better off if we can trade more frictionlessly around the world, including with the United States. I think the kindest thing you could say about yesterday's deal, it was a bit overhyped, talking about a historic deal, a great deal. This wasn't the comprehensive deal that we sought and would continue to seek, and the government's got a lot more work to do.
I mean, you haven't been watching then. Darren Jones just said that TV and film is going to be exempt from this, so those tariffs won't be coming in. And
well, that's great, but why didn't they say that yesterday? I mean, we'd summoned them to Parliament. It wasn't mentioned in the government press release. But of course, it's good. We don't support tariffs. This is a wonderful country. We make things the world wants to buy. Our professional services, our creative industries. Let's try and reduce tariffs wherever they exist. And really step into this and do the proper comprehensive trade deal.
Andrew, the charge that they haven't got anything done, it's not really fair. You guys tried to get an agreement with the US, you couldn't get it over the line. You tried to get an agreement with India, you couldn't get it over the line. This lot have managed to sign 2 deals in a week. It's not bad going.
No, look, I don't want to oppose for opposition's sake. Let's be really clear about that. And this is very, very good news for automotive manufacturers who are looking down the barrel of a 25% tariff, which would have crushed their business. But we still remain in a position that there's 10% tariffs across really the whole of the UK economy. That is a difficult thing and needs to be continued to work at and remove. And it's just not fair to compare the comprehensive trade agreement that we would have done. It's a whole library full of books on the shelf with picking one individual title and saying, look, we've been able to do this on the back of only really eliminating tariffs. So I really hope the government's committed to using our freedoms outside the EU to have deals with the Gulf, with India, with the United States. When they do that, we will support them. Yesterday, a bit overblown, a step in the right direction, but a lot more to do.
I did put that to Darren Jones as to whether or not it was overblown. because we're not in a better position than we were before Liberation Day. He said you have to deal with the world in which you find yourself in, and that's real, isn't it? I mean, if you guys are in government now, you'd have to deal with these tariffs. You don't have a strategy for getting rid of them entirely.
Well, we would have done some things differently.
Like what?
We wouldn't have lost the services of Crawford Falconer, really experienced trade negotiator. We would have got round the table earlier. The government waited until after Inauguration Day, but they lost 2 months after the election that they could have been doing things. The UK and the US have great shared trading relationships and history together. So who knows what we would have been able to achieve, but our focus would have been on that broader, more comprehensive agreement that would have benefited consumers and businesses on both sides. That's where everyone's eyes, that's the prize for everybody. So this government, you need to carry on and do that. There's lots of challenges and headwinds in the economy. British business desperately need all of the opportunities to trade with the world that any government can deliver.
Mr. Crawford Faulkner called it a smoke and mirrors deal a few hours ago, so maybe his input would have been interesting. On another topic, we had an intervention last night from Boris Johnson, rowing in for his support behind Kemi Badenoch. Is that a useful intervention from a former Prime Minister to back up the current leader?
Apologies, I didn't see it. I was commemorating VE 80 Day, an amazing day with an amazing set of celebrations or commemorations of the sacrifice people made, so I didn't see that. Look, the Conservative Party's got a big job of work to do, right? We've got to reformulate our policies, bounce back from really the low of last year's general election. That's going to take time. And I think what people want to hear from us now is that we're united, we're competent, we've got a clear plan for the economy, which isn't a sugar-rushed plan, just based on rushing out announcements, but it's a comprehensive plan as to, how we're going to compete in this wider world that we're in. Britain's a wonderful country, we've got a great vision for the future, but you've got to take this step by step and make sure people are ready to listen to us again.
Does that kind of support help, though? Or is it like a chairman saying, we support the manager, and then in 2 weeks' time the manager gets the boot?
Look, it's always supportive.
She's under pressure, isn't she?
I think Kemi's doing a really good job. I think it's a really difficult job. We, as a Conservative Party, the shadow cabinet, are united. We're pulling together in a way, frankly, hasn't happened for a long time. But I accept we're out of the spotlight. We're reformulating policies. We're talking about, how we will have an immigration system that works, that's credible, a detailed set of plans, not just slogans. And look, I hope in time your viewers will give us the chance, give us a hearing to hear our plans for the UK, but it will take time.
Good to hear from you this morning. Andrew Griffith, thank you very much. So short, but thank you for being with us. Right, let's take you back to Moscow as we were discussing. It is Victory Day for Russia. Vladimir Putin there greeting world leaders before the military parade begins in about 10 or 15 minutes' time. Assume they're inside the Kremlin right now as Vladimir Putin welcomes those world dignitaries, and then they'll be outside in Red Square for a show of military might. We'll bring you live coverage of some of that parade once it gets underway, as I say, at the top of the next hour. And we'll stay with these pictures for just a moment, because as you saw outside walking along the red carpet before we cut back to these pictures from inside one of the buildings in the Kremlin, the Chinese president there, President Xi Jinping, who has arrived for the Victory Day celebrations just a year or so ago. These two leaders, President Putin and President Xi, saying that their relationship, the relationship between the two nations, had no limits, calling one another after meeting yesterday dear friends. China, who has not vocally supported the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, but has been selling what are called dual-use technologies to Russia, which can be used for armaments. Great concern about that and how the Chinese state has been supporting the Russian war machine. A meeting between those two men to mark Victory Day, and of course all of the world leaders will be out in Red Square in about 10 or so minutes' time once that military parade gets underway. And as I said, we'll bring you a live picture of that once it begins. Oh, well, Jackie's here for all the sport. Hey, Jax.
Hello. Well, this is interesting.
Go on.
So the Europa League final will be two English clubs. So it's going to be Tottenham against Manchester United. It means there'll be 6 English clubs in the Champions League now instead of 5, because whoever wins it will go into the Champions League, and it's just an interesting dynamic. So Ruben Amorim kind of looking at their recent form against Spurs, which is dreadful. So they've lost they've lost 3 matches this season against Spurs, and his theory is, well, we can't lose the 4th. We'll see about that. Exactly what Ange Postecoglou is thinking, and it doesn't matter where we are in the league.
I'm just checking, are they 14th and 15th?
Yes, they are.
15th and 16th
15th and
worse.
16th. Yeah, he's just saying, well, it doesn't matter where we are in the league. We're in a European final. What it sort of does.
I think it does matter a bit.
It sort of does a bit, but you are in a European final, and it's going to be interesting.
Congratulations to both.
Yes, congratulations to both. Let's have a look.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
Dowling's idea about coaches is an interesting one. 42% of Premier League first-team coaches across the last 6 seasons have been English. 56% have been British. The Premier League are also committed to coach development, launching an elite coaching plan in 2020 with a clear philosophy: better coaches lead to better players. Through that, they've supported 480 coaches and coach developers over the last 5 years. Alongside that, there's the Professional Coaching Partnership, bringing together the Premier League, FA, EFL, League Managers Association and others to offer further support for coaches. The League Managers Association, which represents managers in our top 4 divisions, told us they run a significant number of qualifications and personal development services for English coaches, all of which are oversubscribed, they say. But they admit that the football industry in this country is competitive, volatile and short-term. They say increased foreign ownership of English clubs and the purchasing power of English football mean clubs can scour the globe, and that has narrowed opportunities for home-developed coaches. The LMA say that whilst all the football authorities are committed to improving the situation, it's the clubs who need to do more. They need to recognise the rich seam of talent they have on their doorstep and provide environments that allow domestic coaching to develop and flourish. One of the long-standing complaints by aspiring coaches in this country surrounds the FA courses. Too expensive, not enough places, too much prevalence given to former players. So what exactly are the qualifications that you need? Beginners start on the Introduction to Coaching Football. Around 28,000 people do this a year at a cost of £100. Next is the UEFA C licence. Between 5,500 and 6,000 places are available. That one costs £650. 750 places are available on the UEFA B licence. This costs £1,200. You can manage in League 1 and League 2 with this qualification. The UEFA A licence costs climb to £4,000. 120 places are available on that course, and Championship managers require that particular badge. And the highest qualification is the UEFA Pro licence. You need that to manage in the Premier League. UEFA set the number of places available at just 24 a season. It costs £13,700 to do. That's a huge financial outlay for coaches, and the FA Pro licence course is twice the price compared with Spain and Italy, but it's significantly cheaper than courses in Germany, France and the Netherlands. When places are awarded on each course every season, it causes significant debate on social media. Simon Goody has his A licence, but he had to go to Spain to get his badge, and having coached Fernando Torres' son at Atletico Madrid, he now works as head coach of SD Compostela's under-19s team.
Spain for me really was something that I saw.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Thank you for that, Jackie. More from you in the next hour. Let's take you back to Moscow because I want to show you the moment that President Xi and President Putin met. As you can see there, a handshake between these two global leaders, saying yesterday, following a statement, that the relationship between the two sides should be like friends of steel. Well, these are live pictures from Red Square, as you can see President Putin making it clear who is the most important visitor to these Victory Day commemorations by leading President Xi there onto the dais as they shake the hands of, must be veterans of the war. the Second World War. This Victory Day celebration is marking the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany in 1945. We are going to see a display of military might, but we can also see the political might here of President Putin with President Xi. All right, we'll have more of that soon. Let's take a look at the weather.
The perfect climate, wherever the destination. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The next few days look mainly dry. It will turn warmer and there's the possibility of thunderstorms on Sunday. Mostly fine out now, if a bit chilly, but there'll be early low cloud across central and eastern England, which will lift. Plenty of sunshine across the UK and Ireland this morning, but some cloud will bubble up by lunch. The odd light shower is then possible, with southwest Ireland most at risk. It'll be warmer than recently, though, especially near eastern coasts. The far northwest and southeast will be blustery.
The perfect climate, whatever the forecast. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Back to Moscow now, where Victory Day commemorations are about to begin. We'll have the very latest at the top of the next hour.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional. This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Hello and good morning. It is 8 a.m. and on today's programme, President Putin attempts to pull focus from his invasion of Ukraine as Russia stages a massive Victory Day parade.
And in sports, it's an all-English Europa League final after wins for both Manchester United and Tottenham.
It is Friday, the 9th of May. President Zelensky and Trump push for a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine, while Moscow prepares for a show of force in a major military display. Among the dignitaries in attendance for Victory Day is China's Xi Jinping, who arrived just a short time ago. Also ahead, Pope Leo XIV to celebrate his first Mass this morning after becoming the first ever pontiff from the United States. India claims of attack along its western border with Pakistan are denied by Pakistan.
And there's an English team in the Conference League final 2 after Chelsea eased past the Swedish side Djurgården.
Hello, good morning, and thank you for joining us on Breakfast. Now, some world leaders aligned with Russia have arrived in Moscow today to mark Russia's Victory Day, a moment that marks the defeat of Nazi Germany by the Soviet Union in 1945. The Victory Day parade is just about to begin. Let's take a moment to listen in.
Российской Федерации и боевое знамя 150-й Идрицкой стрелковой дивизии. Это священное алое знамя, водруженное весной 45-го года над поверженным Берлином, стало для всего нашего народа на все времена главным символом победы над фашизмом.
But while President Putin shows what his military can do while marching through a square, his so-called three-day ceasefire for Ukraine appears to have crumbled as there are reports of attacks on at least 8 villages. President Zelensky from Ukraine has said that a 30-day unconditional ceasefire would be the real indicator of whether or not President Putin actually wants to bring about peace. Well, that call for 30 days when the fighting would stop was echoed by the US President Donald Trump after he and Zelensky spoke via phone last night. Well, we're continuing to watch the beginning of the Victory Day parade in Moscow's Red Square. Our Moscow correspondent, Ivor Bennett, can join us now live. Good morning to you, Ivor. So we've seen who is the most important world leader to show his allegiance to Putin, President Xi Jinping and President Putin sitting very close by each other on that dais.
Yes, that's right, Kamali. This is a major PR coup for the Kremlin, the fact that Xi Jinping is standing on the tribune, the central tribune, alongside Vladimir Putin, watching these celebrations unfold on Moscow's Red Square. And he's not the only head of state here. There are more than 24 world leaders who have come to watch these celebrations, and including, for example, Brazil's president. There's also the leader of Serbia and Robert Fico, the Prime Minister of Slovakia, an EU member state, which is much to Brussels' annoyance. They see this, and so does Ukraine, as a show of support for Russia's war. But as I say, major PR coup for Vladimir Putin, because it's a chance for him to show the West their efforts to isolate Russia have failed. And this is a day of huge significance for Russia, arguably the most important day on the Russian calendar. Victory in 1945 is used as a unifying force here by Vladimir Putin, and it has become central to Russia's national identity. So this is the start of the parade. It's expected to be a very big one this year because, of course, it's the 80th anniversary. Previous years have been pared down, actually, because a lot of the military hardware that normally takes place has been either used or destroyed in Ukraine. So, for example, last year there was only one tank, a Soviet-era tank, that took part. So it'll be very interesting to see how much military hardware is on display here. But you can already get a sense of the scale of this. Thousands of troops in their units and ranked on Red Square. There'll also be lots of hardware, as I say. I expect we'll see the intercontinental ballistic missile launchers rolled out as a final flourish. And this is not just about the past, I should say. It's also about the present, a way for Russia to justify its current path of aggression and its invasion of Ukraine.
OK, Ivor, for now, thank you for that, as we continue, as Ivor was saying, to see the beginnings of this pomp and circumstance of this military parade as Russian troops march through Red Square. Let's bring in our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, who's joining us from the Ukrainian capital, Kiev. Dom, great to have you with us. How will what's going on in Moscow be seen in Kiev?
Well, I think the Ukrainians will be looking on at this and see it as Ivor has been saying there, as something of a coup. They won't be saying that publicly, but privately, I think they'll be very much regretting the presence of Xi Jinping. I think they'll regard the other leaders there, from the leaders of Belarus to Cuba to Venezuela to even the EU state of Slovakia, as kind of, sycophants who you'd expect to turn up at this kind of event. And the EU will be very upset, of course, as Ivor was saying there, about Fico being there from Slovakia. But Xi Jinping being there is a coup for the Russians. This is the leader of a country whose foreign policy is based on the principle that you do not interfere in the sovereign affairs of other nations, because they don't like other countries interfering in their own sovereign affairs, particularly on issues like Taiwan, on Tibet, on Xinjiang. And yet, this is a leader, Xi Jinping, who has not just tolerated Russia interfering in the sovereign affairs of a neighbour, but actively supported it invading that country. So violating the sovereignty of a neighbour in a way that could not be more egregious. And of course, he's done that, Xi Jinping, because he's seen in what Russia's doing a margin for him geopolitically. He's seeing Russia testing the West, and he can learn lessons from that. And effectively, he's rendered Russia into something of a vassal state. Certainly, that's how many of Putin's critics see what he's done with this invasion of Ukraine and what it's done to his relationship with China. So it is something of a coup for Putin to have Xi Jinping there, and I think the Ukrainians will very much regret that. They will be hoping that the events they're going to have here, particularly today hosting the foreign leaders or the foreign ministers of European nations, all the EU foreign ministers expected in Lviv later today, where they will hold a ceremony in solidarity with Ukraine, but also inaugurate a tribunal that will be investigating Russia's aggression. They will see that as a counterbalance to what Putin is putting on in Moscow. But they will be, I think, looking on at what's happening in Moscow, what we're seeing here, this parade, as a sign of Putin co-opting one of the most important, probably the most important anniversary in the Russian calendar, this commemoration of Russia's extraordinary sacrifices and the Soviet sacrifices, not just Russia, but all its satellite nations as well in World War II. And it's fair to say, I think, that memory of the defeat of Nazi Germany is the one thing that binds this huge, diverse country of Russia together, because Putin has effectively destroyed any ideological belief that they all share. He's destroyed any belief in a rule of law. Putinism and this memory of this very proud victory over Nazi Germany, that is the one thing that holds Russia together. And Putin has co-opted that memory to try and justify this invasion of Ukraine. And therefore, Xi Jinping and the other leaders there are effectively colluding with that, co-opting in the minds of Ukrainians, and they're obviously bitterly critical of their presence there.
Yeah, I mean, it's described between the relationship between China and Russia right now as being like friends of steel. You can imagine how that makes Europe and, of course, Ukraine feel right now. And Dom, you mentioned that meeting in Lviv. Will it be an effective counterweight to what we're seeing here, this pomp in Red Square? And what do you make as well of, after a telephone call between Trump and Zelensky last night, Donald Trump echoing calls from Zelensky for there to be an actual 30-day unconditional ceasefire in the war to prove Putin's willingness to seek peace?
Yeah, well, they will certainly be encouraged by that. And I think European allies of Ukraine have been looking on with real concern at the direction of events diplomatically. Because while they are seeing what we're seeing, represented physically in Moscow today, which is diplomatically Putin not being ostracised, not being alienated and isolated by many other nations, but actually managing to maintain support, even from countries like Brazil, who aren't necessarily in that kind of Russo sphere of influence. So they're seeing that continuing sort of process of Russia not being cut off, which have been the hope, obviously, of Western nations, but also they've seen the leader of the most powerful member of the Western alliance actively, it seems, supporting much of the Russian positions diplomatically in the UN, but also his officials, Steve Witkoff and others, parroting Kremlin talking points. And I think the real concern was that was going to continue, and also they were very concerned about Donald Trump's threat that he was going to give up on his peace initiative, such as it is with Ukraine, and walk away from the conflict and take with him military aid for Ukraine. Now, that obviously would be grotesquely unfair, given how much Ukraine has bent over backwards to try and acquiesce and accommodate his demands for a one-sided peace plan that effectively favours the Kremlin. But that certainly was the threat, that Donald Trump was going to give up on the whole thing, walk away, throw his hands up in despair, and that would punish Ukraine much more than Russia. Now, what we've seen in the last week or so is things moving back towards Ukraine diplomatically. It looks like the Trump administration is now more sympathetic to Kiev, and I think the turning point was what happened in St. Peter's in Rome on the sidelines of the Pope's funeral, and what that led to, which obviously was this rare earth minerals deal signed between America and Ukraine, which yesterday was approved in the Ukrainian parliament, something that Donald Trump in the Oval Office yesterday, while he was talking about the British-American trade deal, said he was very grateful for and recognised. Now, that seems to have given Donald Trump some kind of shiny, exciting thing that he can hold on to, and that is kind of proof of some kind of achievement. And that deal seems to have given him something, it's assuaged his desire for the deal maker having a deal, and he now seems to be moving on to other things. So that threat, it seems, of him walking away from the Ukrainian conflict and taking with him American military aid, that seems to have receded for now. And I think America's allies will be hoping to capitalise on that direction now with a show of solidarity here and possibly other events over the weekend, trying to keep pressure on America to stay on side, stay on message, support them in their efforts to support Ukraine, and put more pressure on Russia to acquiesce with this peace deal, which should see Russia signing up to a 30-day ceasefire. Certainly that's what America's president said overnight in a Truth Social post, something so far Vladimir Putin has been very reluctant to do.
Indeed. All right, Dom, for now, thank you for that. We'll continue to keep an eye on these images from Red Square in Moscow. The man you can see being toured around the armed forces of Russia is the new Minister of Defence, Andrei Belousov. He assumed that role last year, and as you can see, being toured around in an open-top limousine, taking the salutes of the armed forces and exchanging a few words with each different department of the Russian Armed Forces, Army, Air Force, as well as Navy. Well, the parade's going to be ongoing. If you would like to see the latest from Red Square, you can scan the QR code that you see on screen now, which will take you to our website where you can watch the continuing live coverage of Russia's Victory Day celebrations. Now, India has said that Pakistan launched multiple attacks along the country's shared border using drones and other munitions. Pakistan has rejected the claims, but world leaders are urging the two nuclear-armed nations to show restraint. While speaking to Sky's Yalda Hakim last night, the Indian High Commissioner to the UK said that the ball is now firmly in Pakistan's court.
We have made it abundantly clear in our official statement, again, as I said, both yesterday and today, we're not looking for an escalation, but if Pakistan responds, as we have done, we will respond proportionately and in exactly the same line.
Which would be what? Targeting these terror bases or
Well,
beyond?
look, we have said if the military is attacked, we had not attacked their military. As they've now started trying to attack our bases, we've hit back at their air defense systems and at their units too.
All right, let's go to Delhi and bring in our India reporter, Neville Lazarus, for more on this. Good to have you with us, Neville. So can we just clear up some of this claim and counterclaim about what's actually going on in terms of strikes by either side?
Well, there has been a lot of tension overnight, and we've seen from the Indian Defence Ministry a statement saying that 8 missiles and several drones that came across the border from Pakistan were neutralized. This again is sort of a counterclaim and a claim and a counterclaim from both sides of the border from India and Pakistan. But the tensions obviously escalating. Just in the last few minutes, we've heard from the board of Indian Cricket Control, the all-powerful sort of cricket body out here. They have indefinitely suspended the sort of money churning and the most popular tournament and the richest cricket tournament.
All right, I'm going to take you away from New Delhi for a moment. President Putin speaking in Red Square.
Soldiers, sailors, sergeant majors, midshipmen, warrant officers, comrade officers, generals and admirals, I congratulate you on the 80th anniversary of the victory in the Great Patriotic War. Today, we are all united by the feeling of happiness and sorrow, pride and gratitude. We admire the generation that defeated Nazism. At the cost of millions of lives, they have gained freedom and life for the whole of humanity. As those who inherited this victory, we celebrate the holiday of the 9th of May as our own, as the main holiday for all of our people, for every family, for every one of us. Our fathers, our grandfathers, great-grandfathers saved our motherland, and they told us to protect the motherland, to defend our national interests, our 1,000-year-old history, our culture, our values, everything that is dear to us, everything that is sacred to us. We remember the lessons of the Second World War, and we will never settle with distorting that truth. Our duty is to defend the dignity of the defenders and the soldiers of the Russian army. Representatives of different ethnicities who will remain in the history forever as Russian soldiers. Russia was and is an unsurmountable barrier for Nazism, anti-Semitism, and Russophobia. And Russia will continue fighting those who continue to perpetrate these crimes. All the people, our society, is supporting the participants of the special military operation. We admire their valor and their unshakable spirit, which always brought us victory. Dear friends, Soviet Union took upon itself the most difficult, the strongest attacks of our enemies. And our citizens picked up arms and defended all the front lines. And they determined the outcome of the Second World War. Largest battles near Moscow and Stalingrad, in Kursk, in Dnieper. Our Belarus fighters were the first ones to meet the enemy, and they defended Brest and Mogilev and Murmansk, Tula, Smolensk. The heroism of citizens, of residents of Leningrad, those who fought under the fire of the enemy and those who worked in the civilian sector, they created that unity of the country. We had Our people displayed their hero spirit, and we had supplies from Central Asia and other republics where we had hospitals. We had hundreds of thousands of people who were evacuated to those regions, and they were welcomed. We honor each veteran of the Second World War, and we bow down to the memory of everyone who lost their lives for the victory, who lost their sons, mothers, daughters, grandfathers, wives, husbands, sisters, close ones, friends. We bow down to all our comrades who lost their lives fighting for Russia. I declare a minute of silence. Dear friends, in the Second World War, there were almost 80% of population were involved in that war. The complete defeat of the Nazi Germany, militarist Japan, and their satellites. All of this was achieved through common efforts of the countries fighting against that. We will always remember that the opening of the second front in Europe after the decisive victories in Russia brought the victory closer. The efforts of the Allied forces, resistance, and the people of China, everyone who fought for the peaceful future. Dear friends, we will, in future, look upon our veterans who displayed true love for their motherland, who decided to defend their home, humanism, and justice. We will always have this in our heart, and we will keep it for our future generations. We will display our unity in military and civil affairs, in achieving goals for Russia, for the welfare of Russia. Glory to the victory, to the people who won the war. Congratulate you on the Victory Day. Hooray!
торжественному маршу! Батальонно! На одного линейного дистанции! Первый батальон прямо! Остальные направо! На плечо! Равнение направо! Шагом марш! Торжественное шествие войск возглавляет командующий военным парадом генерал армии Олег Солюков. Красной площади воспитанники Московского военно-музыкального училища имени генерал-лейтенанта Валерия Халилова. В 1940 году юным музыкантам впервые было доверено право открыть военный парад на Красной площади. Вот уже 85 лет барабанщики задают темп и ритм движения парадных расчетов. Командует парадным строем начальник училища, заслуженный артист России, полковник Александр Герасимов. Мимо трибун проходят знаменные группы государственного флага Российской Федерации, знамени вооруженных сил России и знамени Победы. Знаменную группу сопровождает почетный караул 3 видов вооруженных сил – сухопутных войск, воздушно-космических сил и военно-морского флота 154-го отдельного комендантского Преображенского полка.
Well, the Victory Day parade is now fully underway. We heard from President Putin there before the marching began and the military bands struck up, praising those who won what Russia calls the Great Patriotic War 80 years ago. It's their victory day over Nazi Germany in 1945. He went on to say that we will never settle with distorting the truth of World War II. And then the next sentence says that the Russian society supports the special military operation, which is also his invasion of Ukraine. He also had a retelling of Russian history there that gave special mention to the help received from former Soviet states as well as China, and finished his speech by declaring victory for those who defeated Nazi Germany and urging victory for his troops engaged currently in his invasion of Ukraine. All right, well, we're going to keep an eye on, of course, what's happening in Red Square and bring you more of these impressive pictures throughout the day. But for now, let's take a look at the weather.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
It will be dry for the next few days and it will turn warmer, but there's a possibility of some thunderstorms come Sunday. Mostly fine out now, but a bit chilly with early low cloud across the central and eastern parts of England soon lifting. There'll be plenty of sunshine across the UK and Ireland this morning, but some cloud will bubble up by lunchtime. Then the odd light shower is possible, with southwest Ireland most at risk. It's going to be warmer, though, than recently, especially near eastern coast, but the far northwest and southeast will be blustery.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Right, well, still to come on The Breakfast Show this morning. From Chicago to the Vatican, we take a closer look at the life of the new Pope. Hello there and welcome back. Our top stories this morning. And Russia's 80th anniversary Victory Day parade is underway right now in Moscow's Red Square. President Putin has been joined by a number of world leaders, including the President of China, Xi Jinping. In a brief speech, Putin said that Russia's duty is to defend the dignity of the soldiers of the Russian army before going on to lead 8 minutes silence. Well, this show of force comes after President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine said a 30-day ceasefire would be the real indicator of Putin's willingness to seek peace. It comes after Zelensky and Trump had a phone call last night in which the President of the United States echoed that call for a ceasefire. India says that Pakistan has launched a number of attacks along their border overnight using drones and other munitions. Pakistan rejects the claims as world leaders urge the two nations to show restraint. The Prime Minister insists that the trade deal with the United States doesn't mean choosing America over the EU. Sir Keir Starmer says that the measures will save thousands of jobs in the car and steel industries, which were threatened by Trump's tariffs. And Robert Prevost has become the first American to lead the Catholic Church. He's taken the name of Pope Leo XIV. He'll lead his first Mass this morning in the very room in the Sistine Chapel where he was elected. Right, let's stay with the news of the new Pope, Leo XIV. We can speak to Gerard O'Connell, Vatican correspondent for American Magazine. Gerard O'Connell, thanks so much for being with us. So we've had now a few hours, 10 hours or so, to really understand who this new Pope is and what do we think his papacy will be like?
Sorry, what's the question?
What do you think his papacy will be like?
Well, I think it's going to be really a continuation, a development of what Pope Francis started. It's as if the baton was passed from one pope to another. He was very close to Pope Francis. He knew the difficulties the Pope had encountered from certain quarters. And he made very clear in his first words to the world after being elected, when he came on the balcony last evening, that he was going to continue on that path, that he was going to work for peace, that he was going to work for a reform, internal reshaping of the Catholic Church, and that he would continue reaching out to people who are on the margins of society. He's after all, he's a missionary pope. He's spent more than around 20 years of his life in Peru with the very poorest of people. He spent about 10 years in Rome. So half of his life he's lived more or less outside the United States. But it's really significant that the cardinals from 133 cardinals from 70 countries in the space of just around 24 hours were able to coalesce and unite around him and elect him in a world where there is so much division and so much polarization. This is truly stunning.
And you know Pope Leo XIV, don't you, Gerard? Tell us what he's like personally.
Well, he's a very humble man. He doesn't try to take the front stage. He's really remained in the shadows in some ways, but he's a very determined man. He listens. He's a great listener. He's got a brilliant mind, and he is able to. He's fearless. I would say we will find that, like Pope Francis, he will speak truth to power. He will be fearless in calling people to task.
And we've already had sort of resurfacing of some of his recent social media posts criticising the American vice president for his reading of the way that one should treat those that we don't know.
Well, he will be very strong, I think, on the immigrant question. I mean, after all, his parents were immigrants to the United States. His family, way back from Spain, from France, and he grew up in Chicago. I mean, here, nobody, I would say 6 months ago, 2 months ago, had imagined we would have a pope who was born in Chicago, but one who bridges the two worlds, the North American and the South American world. He speaks languages fluently. He's fluent in Spanish, fluent in French, English, Italian, and he's a bridge builder. He sees himself as a bridge builder, and I think this is going to be very interesting how the dynamic will work out, because I don't think the United States, the presidency of Mr. Trump, they had imagined that he would become Pope.
Gerard, you've used the word bridge builder. We also described him as potentially being a reforming Pope. On some of the big issues, how do you think he carry himself? How could he reform the Catholic Church? I mean, let's talk first of all about gay people being able to get married in church. Is that something that he would look towards changing? Well,
really, he will continue. Pope Francis started certain processes in the Catholic Church. He said the church is meant to be a field hospital, where we're in a world where there's lots of conflict, a lot of polarization, people feel very distressed, and the church is open. And he's continuing on this path. He is continuing as an inclusive church, not excluding people.
But not changing the doctrine of it at this point. I mean, and in terms of women becoming deacons...
You've got to distinguish between doctrine and discipline. Mm-hmm. Doctrine is, you believe in God and you believe in certain things. Discipline is, what rules have been put in place over time. Francis began to address this question, and I believe he will continue on the same track as Francis. He's a very different personality. He's got his own... He's a decisive man. and he is one who will take decisions when needed, but he will be open to people. He will be not excluding people from the life of the church.
All right, Gerald O'Connell from American Magazine, I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much.
All right, I'm pleased to say Jackie is here with us for some of the sports news. We found out it's in the papers that the Pope's a tennis player.
Yeah, a very amateur tennis player.
like us all?
I think quite a lot of priests like tennis.
Go on.
I don't know why. One of our parish priests, he was African, he always played tennis.
You're quite a tennis player, aren't you?
I'm not at all a tennis player,
right.
but my children are very good.
Taking
Anyway,
things up.
that's another story.
Yes.
The main story from last night is that Tottenham Hotspur and Manchester United will go head-to-head for European honours, but they'll also go head-to-head for a place in the Champions League, despite their lowly league positions. Let's have a look.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
Dowling's idea about coaches is an interesting one. 42% of Premier League first-team coaches across the last 6 seasons have been English. 56% have been British. The Premier League are also committed to coach development, launching an elite coaching plan in 2020 with a clear philosophy: better coaches lead to better players. Through that, they've supported 480 coaches and coach developers over the last 5 years. Alongside that, there's the Professional Coaching Partnership, bringing together the Premier League, FA, EFL, League Managers Association and others to offer further support for coaches. The League Managers Association, which represents managers in our top 4 divisions, told us they run a significant number of qualifications and personal development services for English coaches, all of which are oversubscribed, they say. But they admit that the football industry in this country is competitive, volatile and short-term. They say increased foreign ownership of English clubs and the purchasing power of English football mean clubs can scour the globe, and that has narrowed opportunities for home-developed coaches. The LMA say that whilst all the football authorities are committed to improving the situation, it's the clubs who need to do more. They need to recognise the rich seam of talent they have on their doorstep and provide environments that allow domestic coaching to develop and flourish. One of the long-standing complaints by aspiring coaches in this country surrounds the FA courses. Too expensive, not enough places, too much prevalence given to former players. So what exactly are the qualifications that you need? Beginners start on the Introduction to Coaching Football. Around 28,000 people do this a year at a cost of £100. Next is the UEFA C licence. Between 5,500 and 6,000 places are available. That one costs £650. 750 places are available on the UEFA B licence. This costs £1,200. You can manage in League One and League Two with this qualification. The UEFA A licence costs climb to £4,000. 120 places are available on that course, and Championship managers require that particular badge. And the highest qualification is the UEFA Pro licence. You need that to manage in the Premier League. UEFA set the number of places available at just 24 a season. It costs £13,700 to do. That's a huge financial outlay for coaches, and the FA Pro licence course is twice the price compared with Spain and Italy, but it's significantly cheaper than courses in Germany, France and the Netherlands. When places are awarded on each course every season, it causes significant debate on social media. Simon Goody has his A licence, but he had to go to Spain to get his badge, and having coached Fernando Torres' son at Atletico Madrid, he now works as head coach of SD Compostella's under-19s team.
Spain for me really was something that I saw.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Thank you for that, Jackie. We'll see you again next hour. Still to come on The Breakfast Show. The UK and US have agreed to a trade deal, the first since Trump began his second term. We'll be discussing that next.
The only way into Gaza for us right now is with the Israeli military. The IDF had brought us in to show us a tunnel network under a residential neighbourhood.
The length of time it must have to have created these tunnels must have taken years.
At the end of the day, it's war at the top. It's war down here.
I'm Alistair Bunkle, Sky's Middle East correspondent based here in Jerusalem. As we were filming, there was a gun battle in the next street.
This neighbourhood, the Israeli military say, was the stronghold of Hamas's Rafah brigade.
It was just after 6:30 a.m. when the first shots were fired.
I remember everything. It was a day that I don't think I'll ever be able to forget.
There's no moon, perfect conditions for smugglers and human traffickers trying to move fuel, weapons and people.
The valleys in between, they're some of the main smuggling routes.
After days of negotiation, a major smuggler here has agreed to meet us.
The families that we've spoken to of people who have died trying to cross into Europe, they say you're a murderer. Are you a murderer? No.
Sky News, get the full story first. Begum was 15 when she left East London with 2 school friends to join Islamic State in Syria.
Do you feel that you have committed a crime to the extent that you should serve time in a British prison?
I mean, I feel like the only crime I committed was coming here.
If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. I can take the heat. The second thing that Harry Truman said, was in politics, if you want a friend, get a dog.
My children will love a dog.
In Tel Aviv, a constant streak of interceptions filled the night sky as waves of missiles came in.
It appears to be a very, very large and sustained attack on Israel.
The big announcement, the battle for number 10.
The drone is above us.
It is a chaotic scene.
They've asked us to leave.
It is a clear Labour landslide.
The car is covered in.
Liberated but left in ruins.
A major incident has been declared.
That's when misinformation floods the zone.
It became clear the media weren't welcome.
These extraordinary images.
Must have taken years.
Who wants to talk about politics?
Okay, stand by.
I wouldn't be asking it if I didn't think it was a relevant question.
The winner of the 2024 presidential election.
Quite extraordinary events.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Hello there and welcome back. Well, the UK and the United States have agreed a trade deal which the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, as well as President Donald J. Trump have hailed as historic. Well, let's bring in now the CEO of International Marketing Partners and author of Working with Americans, Alison Stewart. Alison, thanks so much for joining us this morning and good morning to you. They've called it historic. Some people have called it smoke and mirrors. What do you think about it?
Well, I think it's historic, especially because the UK is the first country to have struck this deal. Obviously, there are, at least another 50 plus countries that are awaiting news on when they're next in the queue. I think generally, firstly, the fact it was on VE Day, the 80th anniversary, is significant. I also think it's significant that Trump sees the UK a special relationship, and especially, though, the trade relationship as quite important. And because the UK is, in fact, roughly equal to the US in terms of the amount it imports from the US imports roughly the same value of imports from the UK. I think that's to send a message that if you're seen as an equal partner, then you can get things done for business.
This idea then of reciprocity, we've heard Trump use that word quite a lot. Is the UK, by doing this kind of deal in this kind of way, supporting that argument that global trade perhaps has been a bit unfair and it needs to be more equal?
I think actually where the UK is coming from is it's trying to protect British businesses. The message has been go for growth. And we've heard that message for a long time. And it's hard to go for growth if the world's biggest economy is hammering businesses with big tariffs. So I think the agenda is a business agenda, an economic agenda, which is to try to ensure that British companies can turn the tap back on now of their American pursuits and to get those exports growing and to get them right. Because the people that get that right stand to win an awful lot of money, a lot of market share, and a lot of growth in terms of jobs and economic expansion for the British economy.
Yeah, I mean, they're still in a bad position since Liberation Day, but I guess it's a better position now. But if you may have seen my conversation with Darren Jones earlier, there's still lots of work to be done. I mean, he couldn't tell me when this is all going to come into force.
Yeah, there's still a lot of, unknowns around when, exactly as you say. Also, specifically, which goods have tariffs removed exactly. So thinking about, some of the best British exports to the US include film and television. And we recently learned that there's a potential 100% tariff on films exported from the UK to the US. So that hasn't been clarified. What about all of the fantastic British luxury brands that export to the US? They too are probably wondering, where do we stand in all of this? So there's still a lot more clarity required. I think generally, however, there's a sigh of relief that businesses here have. Because they now have at least a agreement in principle that tariffs will be removed from certain categories and certainly reduced for the majority of others.
Just on the film thing, I did ask Darren Jones about that, and he was quite clear that that's not coming in. He says that Donald Trump has said that. But again, this is the uncertainty, isn't it, Alison? That you can never be quite certain, depending on the day, as to exactly in which direction this is going to go. And despite the fact that there's some industries that will feel pleased about this agreement having been signed, they will really want it to start coming into force before they can feel properly reassured.
That's correct. I mean, for a lot of British companies, their financial year starts April 6th, very much like the tax year in the UK. And for many companies and many of my own clients, those CEOs are now wondering, do we put that U.S. expansion budget back in place because we parked it for this financial year of 25-26. Can we put that back? If so, how do we do that? And so I think you're absolutely right. Clarity is the key. But then again, you can't wait for clarity. You've got to make decisions. If you wait for clarity, you may never get it. So you need to get on with it and act. And start investigating what your American opportunities are on the assumption that the doors will reopen for your business.
I was going to ask you that question then, Alison, not to get into the conversations you've had with some of the people that you advise, but is that the advice now? They've said this is happening, these deals are in place, let's invest, or do you still take a cautious approach and say, look, let's just wait and see what's going to happen in 6 months?
Yeah, so my clients aren't waiting for 6 months because they can't afford it. Because in that 6-month period, their competitors are going to snap up market share and take positions in the American market that will potentially preclude them. So you need to exploit those opportunities now, especially now on the back of yesterday. And while you don't have total clarity on whether your industry will have a tariff, will it be 10%, will it be 0%, nonetheless, you plan as if the tariff is 10%, as it has been for some time, and get on with, making the most of the time that you can.
As a final thought, then, if you wouldn't mind, Darren Jones didn't mind about the theatrics of it all yesterday, with them dialing into that call when Trump's in the Oval Offices and Keir Starmer's at the Jaguar Land Rover factory. What did you make of the sort of theatrics, the pantomime of it all? And is this an indication of Keir Starmer's approach to dealing with this administration?
That's a great question. I mean, if I were a political expert, I could give you a easy answer off the top of my head. I think if I look at it through the lens of my clients and through businesses, I think the good news is that what yesterday did, whether it was theatrical or scripted or demonstrated Ambassador Mandelson's skills and experience, I think regardless of how it happened, the fact that it did happen results is what we care about. And results appear to be that the UK scored a victory yesterday for British industry. And that has got to be good news for those that want to win in a huge economy with huge opportunities for British companies.
OK, Alison Stewart-Allen, really good to speak with you this morning. Thanks, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
OK, let's take a look at the weather.
The ideal atmosphere, whatever the altitude. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, the next few days look mainly dry. It's going to turn warmer, and there's the possibility of some thunderstorms on Sunday. Mostly fine out right now. It's a bit chilly, though, with early low cloud across the central and eastern parts of England lifting. There will be plenty of sunshine across the country this morning, but some cloud will bubble up by lunchtime. The odd light shower is then possible, with South West Island most at risk.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Hello there and good morning. It is 9 a.m. and on today's programme, President Putin attempts to pull focus from his invasion of Ukraine with a massive Victory Day parade through Moscow.
And in sport, it's an all-English Europa League final after wins for both Manchester United and Tottenham.
It is Friday, the 9th of May. Presidents Zelensky and Trump push for a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine while Moscow carries out a major show of force in Red Square, also ahead. Pope Leo XIV celebrates his first Mass this morning after becoming the first ever pontiff from the United States. Indian claims of attacks along its western border are denied by Pakistan.
And there's an English team in the Conference League final too after Chelsea eased past the Swedish side Djurgården.
Hello there and good morning. Thank you for joining us on the Breakfast programme. Well, Russia's 80th anniversary Victory Day parade is underway in Red Square in Moscow. Well, this is the scene live currently as a show of military might is watched by world leaders from across the globe. President Putin has been joined by many, including guest of honour China's Xi Jinping. Well, Putin gave a brief speech earlier, saying that it's Russia's duty to defend the dignity of the soldiers of the Russian army. And then he led a minute's silence. But while Putin puts on this show of force, his so-called three-day ceasefire in Ukraine has fallen apart already, with officials reporting a number of attacks. President Zelensky has said that a 30-day ceasefire will be the real indicator of whether or not Putin wants peace. And that call for a 30-day truce has been echoed by President Trump after he and Zelensky had a phone call last night. Let's take a listen to what President Putin had to say just a short time ago.
Today, we are all united by the feeling of happiness and sorrow, pride and gratitude. We admire the generation that defeated Nazism at the cost of millions of lives. They have gained freedom and life for the whole of humanity.
Well, let's bring in our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, joining us from the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, as we continue to watch these live pictures of the military might of the Russian army being displayed in Moscow's Red Square. Dom, it's great to have you with us. I mean, you are in Kiev. How will what we're seeing here in Moscow be received there?
Well, I think Ukrainians are looking on at what's happening in Moscow with disgust, but also concern. I mean, disgust because, despite the fact that Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine without any reason in an unprovoked act of aggression and has killed many, many people, both Russian and Ukrainian, in the years since the war began, he has a number of world leaders deciding to come and join him on the parade as they look at the Russian military parading and commemorating World War II. And what the Ukrainians say is that effectively Vladimir Putin is co-opting this day, the most important day in the Russian calendar, to try and justify his unjustifiable war in Ukraine. Let's talk to Hannah Hopko, who is a Ukrainian former MP, but also former chair of the Ukrainian Parliamentary Committee on Foreign Affairs and co-founder of the International Centre for Ukraine Victory. When you look at these pictures of Xi Jinping and the leaders of Brazil, Slovakia, Cuba, Venezuela in Moscow, alongside Vladimir Putin, does it make you sort of give up hope that the world is now deserting Ukraine and rallying around Vladimir Putin?
No, I just understand that the responsibility for Ukraine as a spiritual basket of the world is even growing. Why? Because all these countries which today marching side by side with Russian soldiers and standing by Putin, so they are sharing the responsibility for the war crimes, crimes against humanity, atrocities that Russia committing against Ukraine. Today is the day of Europe, and Ukraine fights for the dignity and freedom in Europe. So Russian genocidal war against us, it's a war in Europe. So Europe should take more responsibility, confiscate Russian sovereign assets, also full blockade of trade in Baltic Sea, ramp up production. EU as a defense union has to become a geopolitical player, because what we are seeing in parade today is not celebration of victory over Nazi regime, because Nazi regime was defeated, but not Soviet communist regime. This is why when Soviet Union collapsed, we've seen the end of communism, but not the end of Russian imperialism. And it's important today to see that Russianism is now joined by other countries which don't understand that they are trying, actually, not just marching side by side, but sending the signal that one day, if we but we will never surrender, never be defeated. But this is what they want, to march in the European capitals.
And on that subject, so we've seen some important diplomacy going on as well in Moscow, because we've seen Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin over the last few days agreeing to deepen their strategic relationship. Does that worry you? Does it suggest that China is going to be even more involved in supporting this war against your country?
It means that we have to produce more drones and to organize more deep strikes inside Russia. Because for these 11 years of Russian aggression against us, 11 years ago it was Russia alone. Now it axis of tyrannies. North Korean soldiers, Chinese soldiers. But this joint statement from Xi and Putin, it's about Sino-Russian alliance and their preparedness to attack European nations and Western rules-based order.
So China's the enemy as well now? Is it justifiable for you to attack China and North Korea if they're on the same side as Russia?
It's not about attack. It's about increasing our capabilities and also European capacity to be prepared. Because desovereignization of Belarus happened. So they are increasing their number, their coalition of their axis of tyrannies. So why? Do you think this is just the signal that, no, they want to threaten a big Europe, and for Ukraine it means that we have to double our efforts. And United States, with their naive approach that they could decouple Russia from China, failed. So this is why withdrawing Russia from China is impossible. It's another proof that China blessed this war when Putin started the full-scale invasion in 2022. And now China, what we need to prevent, that China provide even more, not just dual-use products, but also military components. That China is in war already on Russian side.
So while we see autocrats and sycophants gather in Moscow to help Vladimir Putin commemorate this anniversary, but also to show their support, in Lviv, here in Ukraine, we're going to see foreign ministers from across Europe gathering, amongst them David Lammy, Britain's Foreign Secretary, who we now understand is on his way to Lviv. What's your message to them as they meet here in Ukraine?
Victory of Ukraine is the only way to deter the axis of tyrannies, axis of dictatorship. So the faster Ukraine receives everything needed, I hope that Chancellor Merz will bring the decision of Taurus missiles. Unfortunately, Scholz never delivered this. Like Biden was reluctant to provide ATACMS and green light the deep strikes. So it's a time to act, because sometimes it would be too late.
I mean, the Europeans are saying to you diplomatically and to your government, you've got to come up with a compromise. There's got to be a ceasefire. There's got to be negotiations. And at some point, you're going to have to accept that you're going to have to give up land for now, at least. Do you think, though, that Ukraine, with the right support, could actually still win this war?
This war is winnable. And now 3 nuclear states fighting against Ukraine, which gave up the third largest nuclear arsenal in the world when Soviet Union collapsed. So actually, and even with this, Ukraine managed to be in Russian territory in Kursk region. We managed successfully to destroy Russian military depots, bases at the Russian territory. So we is an asset for Europe. We are a contributor of European security. We have to think about the new security architecture in Europe. Definitely, Ukraine victory is better than compromises, and I don't believe in ceasefire. Putin doesn't want to end the war. He wants to win the war. The same like Xi Jinping, they want to look like a winner. So my question to Trump, do you want to be on the victory winner side or not? So after Assad regime fall last year, it's a time for Putinism to go like the Moscow sheep in the Black Sea.
Hannah, it's great to have you on, because you are very well connected and very well plugged into what your government is thinking. And you're saying that it's still an open question whose side Trump is supporting. As we look at these pictures in Moscow, we look at Putin sort of undaunted by the criticism and the attempts by the West to ostracize Russia, gathered there with his allies and his admirers. Within the Ukrainian government, is there a realisation or an expectation at some point under Donald Trump, America is going to pull its support and that you're going to have to go it alone with Europe?
So, of course, we are preparing for the worst-case scenario. And worst-case scenario for Ukraine and Europe, it's America withdrawing and America from mediator within the reset, with Russia joining to another camp. It's worst-case scenario. But with America support, without support, we keep fighting. We will never surrender. And here we see St. Michael Cathedral, St. Sophia Cathedral. When Ukraine, Kiev, Rus was building the churches, Moscow didn't exist. So it's a civilizational battle for us. And my advice to Trump, looking at the churches here in very sacral place, you cannot serve two masters.
But how frustrating is it for you when you, as you say, you look at these symbols of Western civilization as you see it, and yet Donald Trump doesn't seem to see that. He seems to sympathise with the other side as much as your side, if not even more.
So actually, Trump could build Trump Tower or some luxury locations in Crimea, because I think that Crimea is achievable goal for this year. And the more weapon, and especially we receive, and it's not about weapon, it's about political will. Because there are some capitals which are more scared about Ukraine victory than Russian defeat, which is really, it's a way of capitulating to Russia. So why Ukrainian soldiers, Ukrainian nation keep demonstrating fighting spirit to the level we want to defeat Russia and punish, because justice, this is what missing here when we are talking about ceasefire, peace settlement, a future peace agreement. So without justice, we will see these days, 80 anniversary of commemorating the victims of Nazi. So unfortunately at that time, because of geopolitical pragmatism, Soviet Communist Union wasn't punished. So this is why never again happened again, this famous phrase. So now we are seeing Russianism, and what we've seen in Baltic Sea. And even in UK, you could see that you can unimagine the bombs falling on your head. But there could be poisoned water in your water pipes or other subversion acts. So this is why I think that either we defeat Russia together and do it faster, or the axis of tyrannies will start attacking hybrid ways already happening, but the confrontations and this march today, this parade, it's like an announcement of the World War III, about this is here we are, this is our plan, we don't care about international rules-based order, we don't care about human rights, we don't care about the West. So they are seizing this momentum of the weakness of the West when Ukraine demonstrates strong leadership and increase our defense production.
Hannah Hopko, great to have you on. As I say, you're very well informed about what's going on, very well plugged in, so great to get your insights on this day as we look at these pictures from Moscow and get a sense of the message here from Kiev of defiance, but also a very clear warning and a challenge to the West that failed to deter Putin's invasion, has failed to give Ukraine what it needs to reverse the invasion. And today, on this crucial anniversary, is sending its foreign ministers to Lviv, the town in the west of Ukraine, trying to send a message of solidarity and unity with the Ukrainians. But the Ukrainians expect to see something more than that. They want to see more support, particularly because of these doubts about where Donald Trump is coming down still on which side of this conflict.
OK, Dom, for now in Kiev, thank you for that, and thank you to Hannah as well. As we're continuing to look at these pictures from Red Square in Moscow's President Putin has left the stage, the dais where he was seated with other world leaders, and now, as you can see, greeting members of the military, decorated individuals. You can see the medals across their chests are being introduced to each of them. And there in the background, again, the individual who was touring around Red Square in that open-top car, the Defence Minister, Andrei Belousov. Let's bring in our Moscow correspondent, Ivor Bennett, who is watching on at this moment with us as well. Ivor, it's good to have you with us. So we saw some of the military might, we saw some of the tanks, we saw some large missiles, and there was also a fly past. And Putin now greeting some of the troops. Is there a sense there that what he calls his special military operation, his war, is supported by Russians broadly?
Yeah, hi, Kamali. So the parade has just finished, as you say, and the leaders who are guests here and VIPs have just made their way past us, where the foreign press are assembled. on their way to go and lay flowers at the tomb of the unknown soldier. And a couple of things just jumped out to me. That Nicolas Maduro, Venezuela's president, raised a fist, and there was applause erupting here in the crowd. He made the V sign for victory or peace as he saluted the crowd. Also, China's President Xi Jinping waved and greeted the crowd also to ripples of applause here. So I think the audience is certainly very grateful that these leaders have come in what is being seen as quite an overt show of support for Russia and its war in Ukraine. As for the parade itself, I think the first thing to note was the size and scale of it is much bigger than previous years. The last couple of years it's been pared down because a lot of the hardware and personnel, of course, have been in Ukraine. So I think I'm right in saying it was 7,000 or 8,000 troops 2 years ago, similar figure last year. This year it was 11,500 servicemen, including 1,500 troops who served in Ukraine, and also, as you saw, dozens of tanks. Last year there was just one, a Soviet-era tank. This year, dozens. Also, armoured personnel carriers, armoured reconnaissance vehicles, and drones mounted on the back of military trucks, which have, of course, been at the forefront of Russia's offensive in Ukraine. And to me, this is a projection, or an attempted projection, of Russian confidence, that they are confident that they can spare all these units for this massive parade. But underneath that confidence, there are fears that this parade would be disrupted by Ukraine, and that's why I'm speaking to you on the phone. All the internet signals have been jammed here, which is why we can't do a normal broadcast using a camera. The only signal we can get is via a traditional telephone. And that really speaks to, I think, Russia's anxieties and fears, and that actually, despite this show of strength and confidence, not everything is normal here by any stretch.
Absolutely. All right, Ivor, we appreciate the update for now from Moscow. Ivor Bennett there, our correspondent, with his reflections on the ongoing, as we can see, commemoration of the Soviet Union's defeat of Nazi Germany in 1945 with Russia's Victory Day today. President Putin meeting veterans and dignitaries. Well, let's bring in Robert Clark now, who's from the Yorktown Institute. Robert, it's good to have you here in person. Look, what do you make of what Ivor was saying just then towards the end of his answer about the size of this year's parade being bigger, more drones, more tanks available, a sign of confidence?
Yeah, it's a really good indicator, isn't it, actually? The size of this year's parade, just one, the confidence that was previously mentioned just now, but also the scale of which the Russian military have been able to rearm and re-equip. So far from the prevailing narrative, which is, Ukraine have done a magnificent job militarily over the last 3 years, holding back Russian advances. But in the last 6 to 12 months, Russia have really been managing to chip away further west. And at the same time, because the West has been so fragmented, by and large, in terms of its response to Putin, it's given Russia that valuable window of opportunity in that time to rearm and remilitarise. And we can see that plainly today on the streets of Moscow.
I mean, Putin always has a swagger when he walks, but he looks like a confident man who's very, very much in control of this situation and will do what he sees fit next.
Well, I think that helps having, obviously, Xi Jinping in tow next to him. Look, I mean, there's about 27 or 29 world leaders in Moscow today. Now, most of them are obviously authoritarian dictators, but having the Chinese premier really sort of highlights sort of Russia far from its ostracisation from the world order. It's really the fact that many countries are sympathetic to Russia, and China is really starting to reinforce that alliance with Putin going forwards.
Yeah, I mean, they're described as friends of steel. Is there a danger that it could go further? They're already providing dual-use technology. The next step would be weapons, but we're not anywhere near that yet.
No, I mean, so the Russian military have traditionally heavily relied on Chinese sort of technology, technology transfer, and supply chain reliance as well, so critical chips and components for its military. But interestingly, it's not just the relationship with China that's driving this forward, it's increasingly with Iran and North Korea, the so-called CRINC, and it's the ability to for Russia to harness not just its leverage with China, but also these other authoritarian states that threaten the global order. We saw vast amounts of Iranian drones in Ukrainian airspace targeting Ukrainian towns, but also now the North Korean soldiers and North Korean weapons. Around 5 million artillery shells alone have made their way to Russia from North Korea. And that's all because of the relationship with China and the sort of legitimacy that Xi Jinping has given Russia's invasion.
Well, we'll have more from you later on at this hour. Thank you very much for that. For now. All right, well, that's still to come on The Breakfast Show. We'll have the latest on the increase in tension between India and Pakistan.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Hello there and welcome back. Just something to be aware of. Shortly this hour, we are expecting to see some pictures coming into us from Oslo, the Norwegian capital, where the Prime Minister Keir Starmer is meeting fellow leaders of the Joint Expeditionary Force. The Prime Minister is going to announce British measures to cut down on what's called the Russian shadow fleet and to add additional pressure to the Russian economy. When we see the Prime Minister pop up in Oslo, we'll bring you those pictures and anything he has to say. But to India now, and Pakistan is said to have launched multiple attacks along their shared border using drones and other munitions. Pakistan, for its part, has rejected the claims as world leaders urge the two nuclear-armed states to show restraint. Well, our Asia correspondent Cordelia Lynch sent us this update from Lahore just a short time ago.
Currently, both India and Pakistan claim they don't want to see this situation escalate any further, and yet we are seeing no let-up in this tit-for-tat between the two countries because distrust runs very deep indeed. We are seeing both sides claiming that their military sites are being targeted, that civilians are being killed, and they want to make declarative moves and to make their point clear. I think anxiety is running deep in places like this. Lahore, it is Pakistan's second largest city. It's home to around 14 million people, and the Pakistanis claim that drones were sent here and that they were able to intercept them. But I think amongst the people you speak to, that's a worry. It's very close to the border. It's home to a large civilian population as well. There is diplomacy taking place publicly and, of course, behind closed doors. We've heard from Iran, from the UAE, from China, and also from the United States. The US Secretary of State Marco Rubio calling for immediate de-escalation. But there are limits, too, to that diplomacy. And we've heard from the Vice President, J.D. Vance, who said that they don't want to get involved in foreign wars that are none of their business. And so we will have to see how it plays out, how they are able to contain this tension, India and Pakistan, between themselves as well. But I think it is too soon to give any kind of forecast of where this is going. They both, I think, know and fully accept that all-out war is not an option right now and is something that they deeply want to avoid. And yet, I think they also want to make clear that they are not going to back down. They want concessions from either side, and they are not seeing it yet. And so this is a tense moment. It's a major inflection point, and it's causing the kind of fear that we haven't seen between the two sides for decades.
Cordelia Lynch reporting there from Lahore. Well, let's go to New Delhi and bring in our India reporter, Neville Lazarus. Neville, what's been the response so far from the Indian government to this latest round of back and forth fire?
Well, here the tensions are still there. We've early in the morning we've had the chiefs of all three sections of the military, the army, the air force, and the navy meeting the defense minister. He was then briefed by other security agencies, including the National Security Advisor. So they are keeping it up out here. In fact, the Defense Ministry had put out a statement that 8 missiles and several drones were neutralized last evening and through the night. And also there's been very heavy artillery and mortar shelling across the line of control. And they went on to say that 1 woman was killed and several injured. But in the last hour, we've heard from the Cricket Control of India. They have suspended the sort of very popular and money-churning Indian Premier League tournament, one of the richest in the world. Last night in a match, it had to be abandoned midway down in Dharamshala, which is north, close to the border, because of these drone attacks that were coming from across the border. Still tensions quite high, and India's keeping a very close eye on what is taking place across the border in Pakistan.
OK, Neville, for now in New Delhi, thank you for that. Let's take a look at the weather.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
It's going to be mainly dry for the next few days, but it will turn warmer, and there's a possibility of some thunderstorms come Sunday. Mostly fine out now, if a bit chilly, with early low cloud across central and eastern parts of the country. Lifting, there'll be plenty of sunshine across the UK and Ireland this morning, but some cloud will bubble up by lunch. I'll bring the odd light shower, with southwest Ireland most at risk. It will be warmer, though, than recently, especially near eastern coast, but the far northwest and the southeast will be blustery.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Well, still to come on The Breakfast Show, we will have the latest on the escalating tension between India and Pakistan. And we'll be back in Rome as the Pope prepares to celebrate his first Mass as the new head of the Catholic Church. Hello and welcome back. Our top stories at this hour. And Russia's 80th anniversary Victory Day parade is underway. Here are live pictures from Moscow's Red Square, where the assembled world dignitaries are about to lay wreaths at the tomb of the unknown warrior. President Putin has been joined by a number of world leaders. Guest of honour, though, of course, is the President of China, Xi Jinping. Well, the parade came just hours after President Volodymyr Zelensky said that a 30-day ceasefire in Russia's invasion of Ukraine will be a real indicator of Putin's willingness to seek peace. Well, India says Pakistan's armed forces have launched multiple attacks along their border overnight using drones and other munitions. Pakistan have rejected the claims as world leaders urge restraint. The Prime Minister insists that the trade deal with the United States doesn't mean choosing America over the EU. Keir Starmer says the new measures will save thousands of jobs in the car and steel industries, jobs that were threatened by Trump's tariffs. And Robert Prevost has become the first American to be elected leader of the Catholic Church. He has taken the name of Leo XIV and will celebrate his first Mass this morning in the room in which he was elected in the Sistine Chapel. Right, let's stick with the new Pope and bring in our Europe correspondent, Siobhan Robbins, who, yes, I can see still is in the Vatican. And Siobhan, I was watching your coverage yesterday as the moment of white smoke came up from that chimney. What's the feeling this morning in the square?
There's a lot of intrigue. You can see that it's already buzzing this morning. People starting to gather, hang around. They've got the big screens on again because in around half an hour from now, the new Pope, Leo XIV, will hold his first Mass for cardinals in the Sistine Chapel. So I think people are here, pilgrims are here, gathering to try and watch that. And we're starting to get an insight into the type of man that he is. So we got some pictures from the Vatican last night, which shows him the moment he walks through the Sistine Chapel after he has been elected as Pope. And he's wearing, of course, the official robes. But on his feet, interestingly, he's not wearing the red slippers at that point. He's chosen to wear the black shoes. And that's really similar to Pope Francis, of course, who came before him. And we are told by people who know him, his brother, for example, who's spoken to our sister station NBC, that he thinks that he's going to be, in some ways, a bit of a continuation of Pope Francis, that they hold similar stances on things like the environment, like migration. The other thing we understand that the new Pope did last night was visit the staff at his old lodgings here in Rome. Before he was elected Pope, he had a job which involved appointing bishops. And so he's been back there to say thank you to the staff. And we're also getting a little bit of an insight into that secretive ballot that happened inside the Sistine Chapel. Now, Vatican sources had told us that in the first 3 rounds, it was actually the Italian Cardinal, Pietro Parolin, who was leading, but he didn't have enough votes to get that 89 needed to get the majority. And we understand in the 4th vote, he put his weight behind who is now Pope Leo, and that's why he has been chosen. So we're expecting him to see him in this Mass, and then next week we'll see him being officially anointed, as you like, going round as well. So we'll see more of him unfolding through the day.
OK, Siobhan, for now, thank you very much for that. All right, viewers, we're going to take you back to Moscow, where those wreaths have been laid at the tomb of the unknown warrior. There you can see President Putin with those assembled world leaders. Just over his shoulder there was Robert Fico from Slovakia. The tributes now being paid to the Russian war dead on this day that Russia marks the 80th anniversary of victory over Nazi Germany. And President Putin is joined by those world leaders, including President Xi Jinping of China, whom he can call allies. All right, we'll keep an eye on the situation in Moscow, but I want to take you to Oslo now, because the Prime Minister, as I said, has been speaking in the Norwegian capital. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Well, it's very good to be back here in Norway for this really important meeting with Jeff allies. And I think events of the last few months show that we're living in an ever more unstable world, and to have allies like this coming together, an agile group of colleagues to discuss issues of defence cooperation, coordination at this vital time is hugely important. So I'm very pleased to be here. Of course, Ukraine will be on the agenda first thing this morning, so I look forward to working with our colleagues here. It's an excellent group. Thank you.
Just a few words there from the Prime Minister as he says he is joining those fellow leaders of the Joint Expeditionary Force, as a group of Northern European nations who coordinate on military matters, but someone who knows much more about it than me is Robert Clark, who's still with us here from the Yorktown Institute. And Robert, he calls it Jeff, and everyone kind of chuckles, but it's an important grouping now, and one that I guess has taken on more importance and prominence at this point.
Absolutely. So the Joint Expeditionary Force is UK-led, and every state now, or every member state, is also a member of NATO. It's really come into its own within about the last 12 months, in particular as the perception from Washington has been sort of a withdrawal of interest in the security architecture of Europe, leaving a vacuum. And that vacuum is hopefully being filled by the UK-led JEF. It's important to note, though, it isn't a traditional alliance like NATO, where there's a clause for self-protection against member states, but rather a burden-sharing exercise, particularly in intelligence gathering, and especially in the maritime domain, which is where we can see, for example, the Prime Minister talking in Oslo about the need to sanction the shadow fleet, the Russian shadow fleet.
Talk to us about that shadow fleet then. Ed Conway has done a lot of reporting on this. It essentially was a way that Russia could just circumvent sanctions and continue making money from selling their resources.
Absolutely. It's been making a lot of money circumnavigating those sanctions. There's around £24 billion that the shadow fleet have been responsible for just since 2024, so in the last sort of 13 or 14 months alone. And there's around 100 vessels that the UK have already sanctioned that are Russian-operated. And the majority of these vessels are incredibly old, incredibly ageing, destabilising, and they really pose a significant problem for European security, but increasingly the UK's as well, particularly around the Channel Tunnel and the North Sea.
Yeah. OK, Robert, thank you for that for now. We're going to stay with these pictures for a moment here in Moscow and just stay with the facts of the choreography of all of this as President Putin, they're walking shoulder to shoulder with President Xi Jinping. Just behind him, Robert Fico from Slovakia, as well as those world leaders who want to be seen with President Putin, a man who has invaded his neighbour state, in what he calls a special military operation, which of course is a devastating war. They want to be seen with him on this day where Russia celebrates the victory of the Soviet Union over Nazi Germany in 1945. And as you can see there, President Xi and President Putin sharing in conversation at this moment, having been at the tomb of the unknown warrior, saying that their friendship is a friendship of steel. All right, we'll stay with, keep an eye on what's happening in Moscow, but let's bring in Jackie for some of the sports headlines.
Let's talk about friendship of steel.
Friends of steel, something like that. I've been looking at the Premier League table, just trying to work out who might get into Europe this season for obvious reasons.
I know, it's slightly odd, isn't it? So Manchester United or Spurs will be Europa League champions because they're both in the final. Whoever wins will also get a Champions League spot. Considering their lowly position in the league, it's kind of extraordinary. And it turns a really, really disappointing season into actually quite a good one, you would think.
And expands the possibility of who can get into the Champions League potentially as well, with that slightly extra place.
Well, one of them will get a Champions League spot. So, I mean, you know, you can finish, 15th in the league and get a Champions League spot.
And just right, good season.
Strange times, and it would be probably a good season for Ange Postecoglou. I think if Spurs were to win it, though, I'm not even sure it would save his job. But he said he always wins something in his second season. This is the second season. He's in a final. He's got the opportunity. Big question is it going to be him or Amorim?
Exciting to watch.
Let's have a look at the goals.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
Dowling's idea about coaches is an interesting one. 42% of Premier League first-team coaches across the last 6 seasons have been English. 56% have been British. The Premier League are also committed to coach development, launching an elite coaching plan in 2020 with a clear philosophy: better coaches lead to better players. Through that, they've supported 480 coaches and coach developers over the last 5 years. Alongside that, there's the Professional Coaching Partnership, bringing together the Premier League, FA, EFL, League Managers Association and others to offer further support for coaches. The League Managers Association, which represents managers in our top 4 divisions, told us they run a significant number of qualifications and personal development services for English coaches, all of which are oversubscribed, they say. But they admit that the football industry in this country is competitive, volatile and short-term. They say increased foreign ownership of English clubs and the purchasing power of English football mean clubs can scour the globe, and that has narrowed opportunities for home-developed coaches. The LMA say that whilst all the football authorities are committed to improving the situation, it's the clubs who need to do more. They need to recognise the rich seam of talent they have on their doorstep and provide environments that allow domestic coaching to develop and flourish. One of the long-standing complaints by aspiring coaches in this country surrounds the FA courses. Too expensive, not enough places, too much prevalence given to former players. So what exactly are the qualifications that you need? Beginners start on the Introduction to Coaching Football. Around 28,000 people do this a year at a cost of £100. Next is the UEFA C licence. Between 5,500 and 6,000 places are available. That one costs £650. 750 places are available on the UEFA B licence. This costs £1,200. You can manage in League 1 and League 2 with this qualification. The UEFA A licence costs climb to £4,000. 120 places are available on that course, and Championship managers require that particular badge. And the highest qualification is the UEFA Pro licence. You need that to manage in the Premier League. UEFA set the number of places available at just 24 a season. It costs £13,700 to do. That's a huge financial outlay for coaches, and the FA Pro licence course is twice the price compared with Spain and Italy, but it's significantly cheaper than courses in Germany, France and the Netherlands. When places are awarded on each course every season, it causes significant debate on social media. Simon Goody has his A licence, but he had to go to Spain to get his badge, and having coached Fernando Torres' son at Atletico Madrid, he now works as head coach of SD Compostella's under-19s team.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Well, thank you for that, Jackie. Still to come on The Breakfast Show. We'll have more on that long-awaited US-UK trade deal.
The only way into Gaza for us right now is with the Israeli military. The IDF had brought us in to show us a tunnel network under a residential neighbourhood.
The length of time it must have took to have created these tunnels must have taken years. At the end of the day, it's war at the top. It's war down here.
I'm Alistair Bunkle, Sky's Middle East correspondent based here in Jerusalem. As we were filming, there was a gun battle in the next street.
This neighbourhood, the Israeli military say, was the stronghold of Hamas's Rafah brigade.
It was just after 6:30 a.m. when the first shots were fired.
I remember everything. It was a day that I don't think I'll ever be able to forget.
There's no moon, perfect conditions for smugglers and human traffickers trying to move fuel, weapons and people.
The valleys in between, they're some of the main smuggling routes.
After days of negotiation, a major smuggler here has agreed to meet us.
The families that we've spoken to of people who have died trying to cross into Europe, they say you're a murderer. Are you a murderer?
No.
Sky News, get the full story first. Begum was 15 when she left East London with 2 school friends to join Islamic State in Syria.
Do you feel that you have committed a crime to the extent that you should serve time in a British prison?
I mean, I feel like the only crime I committed was coming here.
If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. I can take the heat. The second thing that Harry Truman said, was in politics, if you want a friend, get a dog.
My children will love a dog.
In Tel Aviv, a constant streak of interceptions filled the night sky as waves of missiles came in.
It appears to be a very, very large and sustained attack on Israel.
The big announcement, the battle for number 10.
The drone is above us.
It is a chaotic scene.
They've asked us to leave.
It is a clear Labour landslide.
The car is covered in.
Liberated but left in ruins.
A major incident has been declared.
That's when misinformation floods the zone.
It became clear the media weren't welcome.
These extraordinary images.
Must have taken years.
Who wants to talk about politics?
OK, stand by.
I wouldn't be asking it if I didn't think it was a relevant question.
The winner of the 2024 presidential election.
Quite extraordinary events.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away.
So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Slide minutes, slide better. Flying minutes, fly better. Thank you.
Welcome back. Now, the Prime Minister has insisted that a trade deal with the United States doesn't mean choosing America over the European Union. President Trump and Keir Starmer have hailed their deal as historic, but the leader of the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch, says that the UK has been shafted. Well, our economics and data editor Ed Conway has been looking at it in a bit more detail.
Now, at this stage, you're probably wondering just how much of a big deal is this? And if you look at the total amount of stuff that Britain has traditionally exported to the US, well, here it is. Over the past 5 years, £273 billion worth. And if we break it down, look, cars, that's the biggest chunk of it. So just under £30 billion in cars. You've got steel and aluminium. They're not going to face tariffs, but it's only £2.7 billion. Jet engines, so some of them, particularly Rolls-Royce, that's going to be covered by this as well. So you can see the amount that this covers is building up. But then you've got something like beef. So a lot of talk about what this is going to mean for access to the US market for beef. That is tiny in comparison with everything else. And then there's the areas where they haven't yet been negotiated, but there's an intention to try and negotiate them, like pharmaceuticals. Toss all of that up. This is kind of best-case scenario stuff in terms of how much is affected by this. And you're talking about £75 billion worth, give or take, of that total over the last 5 years, which is just over a quarter. So that is what is affected by this. And the rest, that still faces those tariffs of 10%. But actually, it's a bit more complicated than that. So take cars, OK? So the tariff on cars used to be 2.5% before this latest Donald Trump measure. Then, of course, that's gone up to 25%. So that's really tough. Under this deal, for the UK, it could well be down to 10%. So better than 25% for those car exports to the US, but certainly not as good as the 2.5% there was before. And it still gets more complicated after that, because it's not all car exports to the US that are going to have that lower tariff. In fact, anything up to 100,000 cars a year is going to have the 10%, but anything above that line is going to be 25%. And if you look historically, in every year going back the last decade or so, we have exported more than 100,000 cars to the US. So you see, it's complicated.
As Ed Conway reporting earlier, I spoke to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones, who admitted that some of the details are still to be ironed out.
This is the start of a set of negotiations with the United States. It's a really important deal at this stage because we had key sectors in the UK economy, car manufacturing, steel, aluminium, that were obviously deeply worried about the tariffs that had been originally put in place. We've been able to lift that pressure for those workers and those businesses in the UK, which is a great deal. But of course, there's more we want to do, and we want to go further in respect of more broader tariffs, but also other sectors like technology, and our officials will continue to negotiate on that basis.
Tariffs will stay in place, though, still, so we're still in a worse position than we were before Liberation Day.
Well, you have to deal with the world as you find it, not as you would like it to be. President Trump, as we know, put in these global tariffs in relation to the US economy. That's his decision to be able to do that. The important news for us today is that in those key sectors on steel, aluminium, car manufacturing, you know, this is over, I think it's nearly 150,000 people's jobs in the UK, 150,000 families today who will be relieved at the fact that we've been able to get those tariffs down, get a great deal for those sectors.
Well, Darren Jones speaking to me there. Amanda is back with us. And Amanda, look, a celebration there from the government as to getting this deal, but still there are lots of elements of this that we just don't really know how they're going to work.
Absolutely. I mean, clearly they want to celebrate a win, being at the front of the queue, the first country that's managed to strike a deal with the Americans and mitigated some of the worst impacts of those tariffs, particularly for the automotive industry. As we were hearing there, 150,000 jobs potentially on the line, Darren Jones said, in not just the car industry, also the steel industry too. But really, as Ed was explaining earlier, this just gets us back to still not as strong a position as we were before Donald Trump became president and started introducing all these tariffs on Liberation Day. So it is clearly a very limited deal. It's not the kind of big, beautiful, comprehensive deal that it was certainly being talked up as, particularly by Donald Trump. And there are many questions, as you say, when all this is coming in, what exactly it means. We've got a bit more detail from the UK government now, published overnight, but it's still very much a sort of statement of intent and of hope of future closer, more specific arrangements. Many questions about what this means for the pharmaceutical industry. There's kind of promise to have a kind of preferential treatment, but that's very unclear. Film industry, well, they've said this morning, well, they haven't slapped any tariffs on that yet, so that hasn't happened, but we don't know what will happen if they do. Food standards, government insists that's not changing. We know there has been discussion about beef. The US expectation and language around this seems quite different. There's also there was an expectation we might see more of a cut perhaps to the social media companies on the digital services tax. That hasn't happened as part of this deal, but the US government have expressed their disappointment at the fact that that's not included. Could that be something further down the line? Because as Darren Jones was saying there's a lot more they want to cover. Technology is a key focus they're hoping to get to. So this is just the start, not the end.
It certainly is. All right, Amanda, for now, thank you very much for that. Let's just take a look at the weather.
The perfect climate, wherever the destination. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The next few days will be mainly dry and it will turn warmer, but thunderstorms are possible come Sunday. Mostly fine out now, if a little chilly, with early low cloud across central and eastern England lifting. Plenty of sunshine across the UK and Ireland this morning, but some cloud will bubble up by lunchtime. Then the odd light shower will be possible, with southwest Ireland most at risk. It will be warmer, though, than recently, especially near eastern coasts, but the far northwest and southeast will be blustery. The afternoon, mainly fine, but southwest Ireland will see a few showers, with the odd one possible across the southwest of England. It'll be dry overnight and turn chilly under clear skies, with a few mist and fog patches forming by dawn.
The perfect climate, whatever the forecast. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
We'll be live in the Sitting Chapel next. Well, that's all from the team here on the Breakfast programme. Gareth Barlow will be up next. Stay with us.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.